everybody. It's been a few weeks, and we'll get one more of these under our belt before Halloween. We're going to do a Halloween show, as we have always tried to do every year, and we got a lot of really great Halloween titles. So we'll have one more of these before Halloween, and then we're hard into the holiday season.
Yeah, man.
Tim, right off the bat, we've seen some movies in theaters, you and I, the last couple of days.
Yeah. I know you're like literally fresh in.
Man, I just bounded out of a 2.5 hour screening, blew down the road, got into the house, piled in here, hooked up the gear, and got hold of you. So you haven't even heard what I have to say about mine, but you tell us about what you saw this week.
I saw the new Halloween movie, Halloween Kills. The middle film of 3 from David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and all those guys. Halloween, his pickup of the Halloween series, 2018. This is the middle one. We know that there's going to be a third one. Halloween Ends. It kind of makes it sort of irritating and sort of, it's inherently disappointing because, a middle film is always disappointing.
Yeah.
The middle film is just disappointing because, you cannot actually get any satisfaction out of the film. They have to save the satisfaction for the third film. Look, the film is a mess. Let me just say that off the top. But it does get a couple of things right. This is one of the things that it gets right. That 1978-1981 film, Halloween 2. The thing that John Carpenter got right, because he didn't know he was going to be able to make that second film. That's why it took a few years, right?
Yeah.
But what he did right is he picked that second film up, Halloween 2, literally at the same moment that the first film ended. There is no time elapse.
That's like the John Wick films.
Like the John, and I think that was fairly novel when Carpenter did it. In I guess it would have been 81 is when he did that. It was fairly novel. I know that it hit me as novel at the time, and me and the wife were like, man, this movie's like picking up from right where the other one left off. Okay. This one does the same thing. David Gordon Green picks up literally at the moment that the 2018 film ends. That film, Jamie Lee and her daughters and all that, trying to kill Michael and all this kind of stuff. And then it picks it up from there and runs it out. It becomes a mess, very didactic. Gets to this whole sort of patter about how we are all the reason why Michael Myers lives on because of our evil. Fuck that. That's bullshit. Michael Myers was a little fucking boy in 68. He killed his sister. They put his ass in the nut house. He broke out in 78. Donald Pleasance, Dr. Loomis, chased his ass all over for the next 40 fucking years. That's what happened. That's what happened. You're not going to make me pretend like there weren't, I think 12, maybe 11 other films, a lot of which Jamie Lee Curtis was in the intervening years. You're not going to make me pretend like that didn't happen. I hate it when movies want you to pretend like all the crap that they did between these sequels didn't happen. That gets on my nerves. That said, it gets a couple of notes right. I love that Jamie Lee, hey, look, Jamie Lee is down for it, and you got about 3 or 4 other characters straight out of that first movie, that 1978 movie, walking around in this movie, 50, 60 years old, however the hell old they are now. Still walk, including one of those Beverly Hills Housewives. I forgot that broad was in that first movie.
Oh. Well,
but Halloween, what are you going to do? Michael Myers.
So there's one more. It's a trilogy then?
It's a trilogy. Yeah. Halloween Ends, which, by the way, it won't. They're going to reboot it because Rob Zombie rebooted it. I mean, he literally remade the 2 films.
Yeah.
07, 09, 010, whatever.
Yeah, they keep doing it.
And Blumhouse, of course, Blumhouse, he has the franchise now. I think he took it over from Dimension, if I'm not mistaken. Still Universal.
Yeah.
But Jason has it now. A little disappointing. I would have thought that he would have found something a little bit more interesting to do with it over there. But, this is what they do. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill still involved. So a lot of folks still hanging around, nigh these last 40 years who've signed off on this thing. And there it is. What are you going to do?
Well, I just got out of Dune, and I'm because they premiered it already, at Venice or wherever it was. The embargoes are off. I will say this. I saw it in the actual IMAX screen over at IMAX headquarters here in Playa Vista, where Denis Villeneuve himself sat and got, they even told us this ahead of this is where Denis Villeneuve sat. He was in this exact room. They really tried to juice us up with it. That's a hell of an IMAX room for starters.
Yeah.
And I got to say this, even in IMAX, watching Villeneuve's Dune in IMAX, I felt like the movie was wearing that IMAX theater the way that Lou Ferrigno's Hulk would wear those clothes on TV. It's just busting at the seams, man. It's almost like this movie is too big to even be a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, he's stretching for scale like I haven't seen maybe ever. I mean, it's really pushing for just a huge amount of scale. And I like it a lot. I think it's an incredibly impressive achievement. But what you just said about middle films applies to this one too. Yeah. Because this is an intended first part. It even says part 1. So there's really no end to it. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's all set up and no payoff.
Yeah, you can't get satisfaction out of if you just can't.
And see, I think back to and the thing is, the other parts haven't even been greenlit. Warner Brothers wanted to wait and see how this panned out.
Yeah.
And I think the smart thing about the Lord of the Rings films was, yes, it was a trilogy. And it worked as a trilogy, but each of them had a certain level of satisfaction in and of itself. You know,
because the books have a certain level of satisfaction in themselves. Because Tolkien knew how to do that. How to give you satisfaction here, yet still set you up for another story over there. But these sequels, they're not that clever. Some of the filmmakers, but I don't know. What does it hold on to? I mean, you ain't got to no spoilers or anything. But does it hold on to everything in the way David Lynch tried so desperately to hold on to so many things? David never read those books, by the way.
David's film is packing too much in.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, like, you realize by the time you get where you are at the end of this is kind of where you are in the Lynch film at about the 50-minute mark or so. I'd have to really time it out, but it borrows a lot of the Lynch aesthetic. It really does. Like, they just said, you know what, the suits and the look and the whole thing, we're going to stick with it because that's what people relate to. We're just going to sort of embellish it. We're going to build on it, you know? So they really stick with the aesthetic that Lynch established. So it's not replacing it as much as it is sort of building on it, I think. But there's your conundrum with Dune, right? It's such a vast universe that you're running. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You're either packing too much in to try to make it work as one film, or you're going to stretch it out and you're going to lose the opportunity to really sort of give people a satisfying, something satisfying to hold on to at each terminal point. And I'm not even sure because, the miniseries, which my wife was part of, whatever it was, 2005, whatever it was. And, Vittorio Storaro shot that thing, which was also, by the way, my wife could tell you was part of the problem because it was a miniseries and Storaro doesn't shoot miniseries timetable. He shoots feature timetable. And it was like, hey, dude, we need to knock another page out. No. Storaro's going to do maybe an eighth of a page a day.
Yeah.
And that's what you get. And so, but even that felt like, you can't, and I'm beginning to wonder if the Dune universe is if you can even encapsulate it properly, because I'm watching this thing and I'm thinking, okay, so much of this borrows from Shakespeare and so much of it was borrowed for Star Wars that in a way, I feel like it's almost, its time has almost passed. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I just wonder how many other people will.
It will be interesting to see. It will be interesting to see. Yes, indeed.
But I will say this. I was not on board with Timothée Chalamet initially. I'm like, you know what? My Paul is Kyle MacLachlan, Paul Atreides is Kyle MacLachlan. I can't see anybody else as Paul Atreides. And I got to tell you, Chalamet does it. He won me over.
Interesting.
Really
Look, physically, Chalamet is a slight person.
Yeah.
He's he's done 2 or 3 films. He played King somebody in something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, was it? No, it was.
Something. And walking around and all that chain metal,
the armor,
armor and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, he couldn't even stand up in that. The actual stuff. I never bought it for 1 second that this 80-pound kid. And frankly, again, same thing. Kyle had a body, particularly back then. Kyle had a body on him, and you bought him as a warrior. and as well as an intellectual. And Timothy, I'm just not sure I'll ever be able. He's just never going to be my action hero guy.
He's not, but you know what? He's intense. He's intense. I think he pulls it off.
He can act. He can act.
So I want to put a plug in right at the top for this terrific book, Made in California by George Geary, which is all about the California-born burger joints, diners, fast food, and restaurants that changed America. This is a great book. Has nothing to do with movies, but the only reason I got it was because the author signed it for us, which I think was really, really sweet. I can't wait to show this to you in person, dude. It's just great. But the main reason I got it is because I am very, very partial to one chain in particular, which is mostly here in Southern California, but I think they trickle into Arizona. It might even be one or two in Oklahoma. Originally Mr. Fatburger, now just Fatburger. Yeah. An amazing place, great food, just straight up good burger joint. I always get their Impossible burgers now. I used to get the turkey burgers, but an amazing story too. Founded by Lovey Yancey, one of the great stories of all time. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she was the first successful black woman to be a restaurateur. Yeah, certainly. I think she was. That's the way that I've, a lot of people have heard of, of some of the first, like we were talking about Madam CJ. But frankly, Lovey was not known, nationwide in the way that she ought to have been. I had never heard of her until I moved here 30 years ago. First location, 1946. Yeah. 1946. And then, she bought out her partner, and by 1981, they were offering franchises, and it's pretty great. I mean, there are now 117 locations all in 16 countries, and they actually have 2 locations in Pakistan, if you can believe that. They've got one in Dubai, and they got one in Beijing too. Now they're mostly here, but man, it's a great story. It's a great story. Lovey Yancey and Fatburger. A lot of other great stories here too. There's like Burl's and Snowbird ice cream is a fabulous story. There's another one I had here. McConnell's Fine Ice Creams is another great local business. A lot of people don't know that's Santa Barbara ice cream. It is amazing, especially the peppermint ice cream is maybe my favorite thing in the world. McConnell's peppermint ice cream, just absolutely to die for. And then I'm going to make mention of another one here that I think people ought to pay attention to. Hang on just a second here. And they've got, so many good ones here. Copper Penny Family Restaurants. You ever heard of Copper Penny Family Restaurants? I don't think I know that one. Unbelievable story. So it's all started right after World War II. This couple, the Averbaus, started this coffee shop called Copper Penny Family Restaurants, and it's an amazing story. It's really an amazing story. You just got to look into it. And a lot of these don't really exist anymore. They've kind of morphed into something corporate, but, Laurie's Prime Rib is in here. That still exists in Beverly Hills. I mean, it's a great, great story. So check this book out. Made in California, the California-born burger joints, diners, fast food, and restaurants that changed America. I'm going to do a road trip one of these days and just hit these places up. Hit them all. Tim, we also lost a couple of filmmakers in the last few weeks. We lost Roger Michell, who, of course, did Notting Hill and, a lot of Persuasion and what was the Changing Lanes? Love, Changing Lanes, The Mother. Yeah. But Notting Hill is the thing, though. Right. You think about it, and most folks, when they think of Notting Hill, they think of, we were talking about this a few weeks ago. You think of Notting Hill, you think of Richard Curtis. Yep. Of course, who wrote Notting Hill. Yeah. But Roger Michell directed that film, and his best work, of course, well before he became a director of cinema, he was a theater director, one of those Royal Shakespeare. And it shows. Yeah, sure. They're all plays, but he really was a wonderful theater director. And sort of very important in that way. And then, his filmmaking career is his filmmaking career. But if you didn't do anything but Notting Hill, I don't suppose that would make you the worst director in the world. And the other loss, which is going to dovetail us right into our, it's going to lead us right into our first review this week because the timing was almost poetic. Melvin Van Peebles. The great Melvin Van Peebles, born 1932, 89 years old, father, of course, of Mario Van Peebles. Yeah.
My father, I got a chance to talk about Melvin a little bit on the radio show, Film Week, our regular radio show. And I got to tell the story of how my father would so inappropriately take me to the story of a 3-day pass, Sweetback's Band. I'm 7-8 years old. My dad is taking me out to the drive-in to see these movies, these Melvin Van Peebles films, because he was such a huge fan. And then, of course, get to Los Angeles in the early 90s. And I think the first time I chatted with Melvin was on the red carpet of Mario's film Posse, which Melvin is in, of course.
Sure.
And of course, Mario adapted Melvin's book for Black Panther. Melvin wrote the book that made him option the book too, by the way. made Mario option the book, which I think is pretty fantastic. And if you really, and the Watermelon Man, and we talked about all that. But if you really want to know about Melvin, and I don't know if this is in that set we're going to be talking about, but what you really want to take a look at is Mario's film, 2003 film, Badass,
which is on the set.
Which is fantastic. It's in the set in which Mario covers that whole period, during which Melvin was trying to make that film early 70s.
They do a commentary together. The commentary includes both of them. It's great.
And Mario plays Melvin, and he's actually playing. You think, oh, well, that's easy. He's just playing his dad. But Melvin had a very particular dynamic.
Yeah.
Mario's a very gregarious guy, funny. Very open. Melvin, not so much. Melvin was very sharp. He came up at a particular time. Did not stand fools lightly, and so he had to actually play this guy that was his father, and not do himself in that film. And it's really, really great film. And what can I say about Melvin Van Peebles? A bit of a mentor to young black filmmakers for, more than 45, 50 years.
My exposure to Melvin Van Peebles came sort of at a later stage. I was, again, you and I have written about this and talked about it before. I was, as a kid, a huge fan of blaxploitation films. Loved all that early stuff. All the Pam Grier stuff, Shaft, obviously, Superfly. Had no idea he was a drug dealer or a pimp. Didn't care. He just dressed cool. Those films were all, Coffee and Truck Turner. And those movies were really, really, very, very seminal for me at that Bruce Lee moment when I was into all that 70s stuff, Dirty Harry and End of the Dragon. It was all kind of part, Starsky and Hutch, all kind of part and parcel.
They even started to sort of cross over a little bit.
They did.
The Jim Kellys and all that,
Yeah, look, Antonio Fargas on Starsky and Hutch, that's the direct sinew that ties that to the blaxploitation genre. And it was probably later in the 70s that I discovered Melvin through his one studio film, Watermelon Man. Starring Godfrey Cambridge, the great Godfrey Cambridge, one of the great original stand-up comics of his generation. And I thought, oh, this is a terrific movie, because it's such a daring premise that he pulls off comedically. But it was a studio film, and Melvin was never happy with it. And it was after that I discovered Sweetback, which was released just the following year, was sort of that was like his seminal, film. But then it was much later that it was in the 80s when I was in film school that I saw A Story of a 3-Day Pass, which is arguably still, to my mind, his masterpiece. That's my favorite film of his.
His earliest film, when he was an expat living in France, wrote that novel.
He wrote it in French.
He wrote the novel in French. Melvin taught himself to speak French and Spanish fluently when he became an expat. I mean, this is this guy, but Melvin was a trolley car driver in San Francisco. Melvin was a street magician. Melvin was a navigator, actually, in the United States Army Air Corps at that period when it was an army. And he was one of the first black navigators, which is something that he and I had in common. We were both kind of in the Air Force. Melvin a musician, poet. Melvin did so many things in his life, and he brought it all to bear in his films. But by the time Melvin was 39 years old, he'd lived the lives of 10 guys like me. So
he is what we legitimately can call a Renaissance man, and we use that term too casually these days. We'll look at somebody who's, say, a hyphenate in the business and go, "Oh, what a Renaissance man!" No. Melvin Van Peebles was a Renaissance man.
What's so interesting that there were a few brothers back then. Him, Gordon Parks, Senior. Gordon Parks Same thing. A Renaissance Man, Sidney Lumet. There were a few of those guys back then, and they really don't exist anymore.
Now, you just opened the door to a question I had for you, and this is something I really find super fascinating because Gordon Parks took a while to get his film career going. Gordon Parks is from the previous generation. Melvin Van Peebles is actually the same generation as Gordon Parks Jr., who died sadly prematurely. But I think Melvin is maybe a year or two older than Gordon Parks Jr. So but yet you get Shaft and Sweet Sweetback kind of right in sequence with each other, and they're both based on novels. Very different. One is based on the guy's own novel, and you even get, Gordon Parks. What was his previous film? Was The Learning Tree? The Learning Tree. Learning Tree was based on his personal novel. So that's, they're all kind of in the same moment, but it's very interesting. In your opinion, I'm really curious to find out who is the more if you had to say one of them is a more seminal figure for black filmmakers at that point, who are suddenly made aware of the fact, hey, I can actually tell my stories. I don't have to work for the man. I don't have to make, whatever is being handed to me. I can go out and I can use this new medium as my tool and my voice to tell my stories. Is Gordon Parks and The Learning Tree more seminal, or is Story of a 3-Day Pass more seminal? Because those films are like a year apart.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say it would be Melvin's films. For one thing, Melvin's films are a bit more transgressive than Gordon Parks films. They're pushing back against the system a little bit harder. Gordon Parks, he would disagree with us that Shaft was a black exploitation film.
Yeah.
He did not feel that was, we've sort of lumped it into that category, but he didn't think so.
Well, it is a studio film. It's more like Across 110th Street. Yeah. It sort of rubs elbows with the genre, but I would say it's probably true. It's not of the genre. Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to Superfly, his son's film, which is unequivocally a black exploitation film.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, Shaft was a guy who was, though not necessarily in the system, was working with the system. He worked with those cops, and he wasn't a gangster. So Melvin's films were obviously Sweetback, slightly more transgressive in that way. Even for that matter, Story of a 3-Day Pass, which is about a black guy who gets in trouble, black guy in the army serving in the military in Europe, and gets in trouble because he starts dating a young white woman. So in that way, I think Melvin, you can find a more direct thread from Melvin to, say, the filmmakers of the LA Rebellion.
Yeah.
You can find a more direct thread there, in a foundational sort of way, whereas, Senior was a little bit more inside the system, telling his story. Yes, he wrote that book, but his films are not necessarily, pushing telling the system. Sweetback is a straight up slap in the face. And then Melvin takes it to Detroit, four-walls it, himself. Yeah. And all around the country. So in that way, I think you might say Melvin was the guy that John Singleton and Spike Lee and, I almost said Charles Burnett, but that wouldn't be true. Sort of like connected themselves to from that period.
Well, it is Melvin Van Peebles passed literally the week before Criterion released this box set, and his death announcement came jointly from his family and the Criterion collection, and I can't imagine that has ever happened before.
Yeah.
So that tells you there that's quite an honor, and he timed his death perfectly to promote his own movies.
It was the exact kind of thing Melvin would do.
Kind of thing he'd be proud of. He's looking down right now and saying, I planned it that way.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to do. But it's an amazing box set, and this was announced quite a while back, and so we've all been looking forward to it. It includes, of his canon, The Story of a 3-Day Pass, Watermelon Man, Sweetback's Badass Song, and Don't Play Us Cheap, which we didn't really talk a whole lot about, from 1972, which is kind of a Broadway, sort of a riff on Broadway musicals. And it includes just a ton of stuff, including the aforementioned Badass from 2003, Mario's film. Conversations between Mario Van Peebles and Elvis Mitchell, which are really, really interesting. Includes also Warrington Hudlin and Nelson George and Gerald Butters. And, it's a really, really interesting conversations there. Melvin Van Peebles' commentary on Sweetback is fantastic. There's a documentary about his life and career from 2005, How to Eat Your Watermelon in White Company and Enjoy It. An interview from 1971 from the Detroit Tube Works. French television interview from 1968, which is absolutely amazing, which is all about, kind of gives you a lot of set visit stuff from Story of a Three-Day Pass, which is amazing. I'd never seen that before. And, just a ton of other stuff. I mean, it's just endless. And
anything from Classified X, that doc, I think it was a French doc, middle 90s.
That is what is missing. And, it's too bad. That's a really tremendous doc. And, I just suspect that they couldn't get the rights to it.
Yeah, he narrates that.
Yeah.
Film. But anyway,
it would have been really great to have it in here. But as it is, this is an amazing box set from a really, really significant figure, not just a great filmmaker, but a kind of an amazing figure in French and American culture in the 20th century. His contributions to American culture, to French culture, are extraordinary. And there just aren't that many expats who had a foot in one country and another, and could be legitimately said to have played a role in the artistic evolution of the two countries. But Melvin Van Peebles did, and what an important character! What a mighty figure, and just a really, really seminal figure for film. So there is that from Criterion. Let's hit out these other Criterions too. We got, as long as we're on the Criterion thing, Visconti's The Damned is also out on Blu-ray. That is from 1969. Not my favorite Visconti film, but it's certainly, in the canon. Great performance by Dirk Bogarde is kind of what anchors it. Some people love this more than others. There's some good stuff here, including a 1969 behind-the-scenes documentary, Visconti on Set, which I almost think is cooler than the movie. And there's a 1970 interview with Visconti talking about the film. So The Damned, one of his, more controversial films. From the Japanese New Wave era, 1964's Onibaba by Kaneto Shindo. Not one of the more well-known names of that period, but it's a pretty great medieval Japanese kind of.
Some people call it a drama, others call it a horror film. It depends.
It's a folk tale. It's a folk tale.
Yeah, those are folk lore. Sort of thing.
Yeah. It's Japanese folklore. On the Hollywood end, we have Raoul Walsh's High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart and Ida Lupino. Standard, straightforward stuff. Got a few extras on here. 2019 documentary on Marilyn Ann Moss, or by Marilyn Ann Moss, about Raoul Walsh, the true adventures of Raoul Walsh. Also have Colorado Territory, which is his 1949 Western remake of High Sierra. Not as good by any means, but why he went and did that is sort of an interesting story. And then there's a new interview with Miriam J. Petty about actor Willie Best, which is a nice little reflection on somebody who's disappeared a little bit. Johnny Toe film called Throwdown from 2004, which I had not seen, believe it or not. I'm a big Johnny Toe fan, especially his earlier stuff. And this is one that I had missed, so I'm glad that this got this totally unexpected Criterion treatment here. It's actually not a gangster film, believe it or not. Yeah. It's kind of an artistic tribute to his own personal inspirations, and it takes place. It's an underworld film. It takes place in kind of the dark, neon-y underbelly of Hong Kong. But it's about a judo champion who's a has-been, and he's now just a bar owner. And Aaron Kwok plays this guy who wants to challenge him, and it's got kind of a noir feel to it, but it's very, very personal, and it's very poetic, and it's an unusual Toe film by any measure. Also got Neil Jordan's Mona Lisa with Bob Hoskins and Kathy Tyson. Terrific. Michael Caine kind of takes a little bit of a back seat here, but Mona Lisa is just a wonderful, wonderful movie. Great transfer here. This has come out a few times. New conversation with Jordan and Kathy Tyson, moderated by critic Ryan Gilby. That's definitely worth checking out as well. And then lastly, want to spend a second on Love and Basketball by my UCLA classmate, Gina Prince Bythewood. She was Gina Prince at the time. Then she married Reggie Bythewood, the screenwriter of Get on the Bus. But Love and Basketball was sort of her coming out as a filmmaker from 2000. And I got to say, when I was in school, there were 2 grad students that were sort of the stars of the department. Alexander Payne was one, and Gina was the other. And everybody knew that those 2 were going places because they just had they were just confident. They did great work. They made great movies. They just knew their stuff. And Alexander Payne had a great go of it. And Gina, I think, fell into, she's had a good career, but she's had some struggles, as I think women, and especially black women, have when they want to be filmmakers. Yeah. She had to deal with both of those things at one time, and and again managed to have a career anyway. Secret Life of Bees and some television and whatnot. But man, she always just had a great eye. She had particularly great eye for actors. This movie here, it's wonderful.
Sanaa Lathan and Omar Epps, of course. But people forget that Harry Lennox is in this film. Dennis Haysbert is in this film. A young Regina Hall is in this film. A young Gabrielle Union is in this film. So she had an eye for talent. And put them to work, and they did really, really excellent work and built careers themselves. In some cases, careers even bigger than hers, which is, again, ironic. Good point. Well, this is just an absolutely wonderful film. I'm so thrilled it's out again, and that it's getting the Criterion treatment. There's making of material on here. There are new interviews. Lots of just wonderful stuff here. New conversations with Gina and Cheryl Swoops and Lena Waithe. I mean, it's really, really good stuff. And you just get a wonderful sense of the creative process of the film, how it came together, everyone involved. It's just a beautiful, beautiful movie. And Gina is finally, she directed that thing for Netflix, that superhero thing that I was not. I forget what it was. Which it was kind of a for hire gig. She opted out of the sequel. I get it. It was a career move, but it's turning out for her. So it looks like her next film is a period film about the last days of one of these sort of true life story about the last days of one of these epic Amazon tribes in Africa in the 19th century. Oh, wow. Which just got announced. They're casting it now. Looks like it should be a great thing. And I'm kind of thrilled that she's gone into Oscar territory because it's where she always should have been. Yeah. Making Oscar level films, really personal films. So that makes, I kind of feel a little bit of justice has come around. Gina's, come around full circle. She's getting a bigger shot at a bigger film. The Netflix thing panned out, which I'm glad. So in the meantime, if you want to catch up on your Gina Prince Bythewood and see what an amazing filmmaker this young woman is, and I'm proud to say she's still a young woman because it allows me to say I'm a young man. Yeah. But Love and Basketball, man, it's an absolutely terrific film. Let's see, Tim, where do we turn? Oh, one other one here. This is not Criterion. This is from Arrow, but Arrow has released Ridley Scott's Legend in a fantastic set that includes the theatrical cut and the director's cut. Legend is famous because this is the first film that that Universal tried to sort of wreck at the time. It was sort of concurrent with Brazil. Yeah. And Terry Gilliam was fighting Sid Sheinberg over Brazil. Sid Sheinberg went on to form the Bubble Factory with his kids, but he was running Universal at the time. Sheinberg had no taste whatsoever, and he did a cut of Brazil that was absolutely horrendous. And Terry Gilliam loves to sort of include that on every set now to show people how terrible the version is that Sheinberg came up with. Anyway, Legend was not so fortunate. It showed its original director's cut at the Cannes Film Festival and then released this horrible Sheinberg overseen theatrical cut in the U.S. with the original Jerry Goldsmith score stripped away and Tangerine Dream stuck in there. And it's just, it's like, 40 minutes shorter, and it's a horrible movie. Yeah. But the director's cut is great. So, finally, we get an absolutely terrific release with both of them on it. Make your own mind up. A lot of really good extras on here. Arrow has done a great job. I wish that it was 4K and not just Blu-ray, but that's okay. I'll live with it.
great transfer, including a great audio commentary by Ridley Scott and an archival documentary from 2002 called Creating Myth, Memories of Legend. So storyboards and a lot of other stuff on here. So both cuts of Legend.
Yeah, young Tom Cruise, Tim Curry, Mia Sarah. Ridley, of course, has a movie out today that, what is that? Last Duel.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. Peter talked about it today on the radio. I won't ruin anything for Ben Affleck, Adam Driver, Matt Damon, Ben and Matt back together under Ridley Scott in a 12th century? It's set in the 12th century, 13th century,
something like that. I want to see it. I feel like I need to see it, but man, it scares me. I can't wrap myself around those mullets that Matt and Ben are wearing.
Well, and Ben is doing that bleach blonde thing for some reason, and I'm not really sure what the hell that's all about. But nevertheless, I'll wait for the awards season swag to roll out, and I'll catch it then.
You should try to catch Dune at an IMAX screen, though. I'll tell you, that thing that just beats you in the face in a really good way. Should we do some TV?
Sure, let's do some TV. If you want to. I see you got Clarice, season 1. Clarice, of course, the principal character from Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal and the Thomas Harris novels, of course. I remember seeing the Silence of the Lamb. I'm going to say, what is that, 92? Something like that. And
90, 90, let's see, 92. Yeah, 92.
And you saw that, and I had read the book, and I thought to myself, well, this was just an absolutely outstanding adaptation of that novel, and everyone's really, really great in it. And there was a big argument about whether or not it was a thriller or a horror film, and all the Red Dragon and all kinds of things sort of going on around that movie. And it was really wonderful. I remember Bridget was in St. Louis when I went to see it, so she didn't get a chance to see it at the screening with us. And the moment she got off the plane, I took her to see Silence of the Lambs. It was that good of a film. All of the films since, and I don't know about this series. I haven't seen it. Nothing has stood up to that film. Ted Levine's performance, Jodie Foster's performance, Scott Glenn's performance, and of course the great Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. To my mind, that could have stood alone. I really didn't need any of the rest of it. I'm not sure about the series. What do you think?
I've tried to sort of give this series a chance. It's not great. It maybe in future seasons they can pull it together. But here's the thing. It is becoming too much of a trope on television. Hey, let's just do an origin story. The origin story of all the Batman villains. We'll do Gotham. Yeah. The origin story of we already had Hannibal, right? We already did Hannibal's origin story, in Hannibal. Okay. And then we did the origin story for Psycho, where we had Bates Motel, Norman and his mom, right? Yeah. So they keep doing this. They keep finding these movie characters and then saying, "Okay, we'll do a series about their origin story." I don't know if there's enough to Clarice to justify. This feels like a New Criminal Minds, like just with a woman, and they're going to name her Clarice. I mean, technically it ties in, but that's kind of what it's doing.
I don't know. And the thing of it is, this is television and movies, but the novel, Thomas Harris novel, is an origin story for Clarice. We meet and learn about Clarice when she's a young girl. The reason why they call it The Silence of the Lambs has to do with something that she experienced when she was a young girl. It's that speech that Anthony Hopkins has with her when he's on the other side of that plexiglass. Yeah, makes her tell her. So I don't know. She's a girl from down south who really wasn't good enough and made herself good enough to be the best at what she does. That's the origin story. We're done.
Yeah. So Black Lightning, 4th and final season. Yeah. I know. We have the same problems with this show. Watch our Godcast. You kind of we touch a tad on why this isn't. Look, I mean, Black Lightning should have been probably better. They tied him in a little bit with the rest of the Arrowverse for that
the infinite universe.
I mean, here's what I like about this show. The actress who plays his younger daughter, Jennifer, China Ann McClain. China Ann McClain is the actress who plays his younger daughter. I am a huge fan. China Ann McClain is going to be a huge star. She's amazing. I didn't really even discover her on this. I discovered her in those infernal Descendants movies on Disney Plus because my daughter can't stop watching them. And on those, she plays Uma, the daughter of Ursula, the villain from The Little Mermaid. So, you know, Uma is a big part of those movies, starting in the second and the third one, Descendants 2 and 3. And China Anne McClain, who was a lot younger then, is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. She's one of the few things that makes those movies bearable. And she plays the younger daughter here, and she's equally great. So I am looking forward to China Anne McClain in bigger and better stuff. She's one of the things that makes Black Lightning tolerable for me.
Yeah. I don't want to beat Black Lightning up all by itself. The Arrow, look, all those CW shows, Arrow, Flash. I think we got an Arrow here that we're going to talk about. They're all wearing a little thin. You know me, I love me some Flash. Give me some Barry and Iris any day of the week. I love me some Flash, but wearing thin.
Oh, well, let's go to that now that now that you jumped on that. We have The Flash, which you and I have loved a lot. Flash, complete 7th season. Man, I'll tell you, look, I've had 2 slogs in recent weeks. One of them was the current Foundation, Isaac Asimov Foundation show on Apple Plus, which I've watched all 10 episodes of because I got preview links to them. So the rest is yet to come. I can't break the embargo and tell you anything about the few. I will just say this about the show. Man, that was a slog. That was really, I had to drag myself hard through that. And the 18, 19, 20 some odd episodes of season 7 of The Flash, much as I have loved this show, I've got to tell you, from about the middle of season 6, when they tie up that whole Infinite Earths thing, the second half of season 6, that whole Mirrorverse story, whatever, kind of wraps up here at the beginning of season 7. You know, it felt like it was on fumes. And then the rest of season 7, I'm like, I don't even know what the story is. Like, he's breakdancing now, and they're doing karaoke. Like, it's almost like everyone in this show, you know, Cisco has left the show because he's like, he's tapped out. He's like, I've taken this character as far as I can take it. You know, they replace him with a guy who's fun. But it just feels like this show is, everybody's done. They're kind of ready to move on. It's lost. Hey,
look, Grant should have been cast as who plays him in the movies? Ira something or other. Anyway, I was a little pissy about that, but now I can see how Grant might have been like, you know what, I got to get the hell out of these red leotards. I gotta be a guy who walks around in a suit.
And he is a really, really good actor and really likable, and he's in his prime now, and he's got almost a decade behind him in the red suit. It's kind of time for Grant to move on and be able to show that he can do other things. And maybe features, maybe another TV show. But as an actor, I think he doesn't want to waste his prime years and wind up in like Mark Harmon, you know, who's now pushing 70 and looking back and like, have I really been doing this show for this long?
Yeah, bro.
16 years.
You were a brunette when you started.
Man, so crazy.
There it is.
We've got some Ultraman to mention too. So in the standard Steelbook releases of the Ultraman series, which is an ongoing thing from Mill Creek, we now have the 7th one, which is Ultraman Leo. This is the original Ultraman Leo show. You know what? Pretty much just like all the others, there's a whole lore to this thing that is just far, far beyond me. But you know, this is the 7th of the ongoing Ultraman series, the original Ultraman series. And if you're a completist, you're absolutely going to love it. If you're not, you're going to watch this and you're going to go, what the hell am I looking at? 51 episodes of this thing, 51 half-hour episodes. It's crazy. And then we also have the Ultraman Galaxy box set, which is a couple of movies and the original series. This is newer Ultraman. Just as ridiculous as the original, but still kind of just as fun. And it's not bad. 26 episodes plus a movie event. And then the other one is Gridman, the Hyper Agent, which is kind of belongs to the Ultraman lore, but it's a sideways thing, the Hyper Agent Gridman. You know, it's more or less the same kind of deal. All these are from Mill Creek.
Dude, what's in that? Because it's under television. What's in that Ultimate Richard Pryor collection?
I was just going to say, Tim, is this like a really black show today? We're so there. It is, man. This is amazing. This is the Richard Pryor, the ultimate Richard Pryor uncensored collection. 2 volumes plus I Am Richard Pryor, the documentary. And this is great. This is from Time Life, and they went and did a deal with Virgil Films. Virgil has the rights to I Am Richard Pryor. So it's all in. This is just everything, man. This is just tons and tons and tons of Richard Pryor stand up, of television appearances. It's pretty much every second of Richard Pryor that he's ever been on television, all packed into a box set. So
Richard Pryor is Richard Pryor, not the movies, some kind of hero, and then JoJo Dance, but Richard Pryor as Richard Pryor and on TV, all that kind of stuff. That's what we're looking at here.
Yes, it's Pryor's. It's sort of like his career. And they've done this with Dolly Parton and a few other people too. You know, it's like a tribute to his entire career. As you know, it's 26 hours on 13 discs. I mean, it is everything. It is just a massive amount of stuff. It's and you do get his concert films, by the way. You get Live and Smoke. Yeah, you get Live on the Sunset Strip and Here and Now. You get those, but you also get his television special from 1977. You get JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling, which was his one movie, his life. He wrote it and he directed, he produced it. You get a bunch of like Comedy Store performances, including the final tribute event to him at the Comedy Store. There are documentaries on here. In addition to I Am Richard Pryor as a standalone disc, you also get Richard Pryor Omit the Logic. You get deleted scenes from, movies. You get outtakes from movies. You get like a booklet with all kinds of personal family photos and stuff from his family. I mean, it's just, there's no end to it. And you get every TV appearance he ever made on every talk show, whether it was Dick Cavett or The Tonight Show, or you name it, all the TV appearances, they're all on here. It's just the complete Richard Pryor. It's the whole deal. It's the whole massive thing that it's his life. It really is. It's the ultimate Richard Pryor collection, uncensored. That's what it is.
Great.
It's amazing. And we also have The Nevers, Season 1, Part 1. I hate it when they do that. I hate the Part 1, Part 2. Like, just give us the whole season. Yeah. I don't know why they're still doing that. Anyway, this is an HBO original. Tim, have you seen any of The Nevers? 1 or 2 of them. I don't know. What do you think? I love Victorian England as a background. I think when they get all steampunky with it and drop sci-fi on top of it, now you're inviting all kinds of sort of Doctor Who comparisons, even though Doctor Who is not Victorian. But you know what I'm saying? Once you get British and sci-fi, everybody starts thinking Doctor Who, and I don't think it compares all that favorably, to be honest. Yeah. Anyway, the idea here is that, this is basically like women with superpowers in Victorian England, crime solving women with power, Laura Donnelly, Anne Skelly. I mean, it's nicely done generally, I guess. And this is a what's his name? The idiot whose name we're trying to all block from our minds. Buffy, what's his name? Buffy the Vampire Slayer guy. Yeah, him. Yeah, Justice League. Joss Whedon. See, it's like he turned into a jerk, and we canceled him in our minds. I can't. Don't need you, brother. Don't need you. Anyway, this is a Joss Whedon thing. So apparently he's still got some juice. Anyway, The Nevers, Season 1, Part 1. Watch it if you feel so inclined. That was 2020, 2019, 2020? This is 2020. This is 2020. It's 2020 series? Oh. Yeah, right. It's nutty. Anyway, we'll be getting Part 2 soon. I'm gonna burn through a bunch of Kino stuff here. We got some amazing Kino stuff that now that I had some space from Film Week, could finally just bear down on. And Kino's been doing a great job of, and by the way, end of the show, we're going to have an interview. Got a great interview with Grady Hendrix and Chris Poggiali, who wrote this awesome new book, These Fists Break Bricks, How Kung Fu Movies Swept America and Changed the World. It's great. These Fists Break Bricks. It's an amazing book. These guys are awesome, totally awesome. As people know, I've contributed to books and written books on Kung Fu movies and so forth. Tim and I, we've done a commentary this awesome
Flying Guillotine and
all this, a lot of great stuff. You know, the Jimmy Wang Yu movie, Knight Errant. You know, fun stuff. So we know this territory pretty well, and these guys were great. I had a great time. Tim was supposed to be in the interview, but you had dental work done, so we spared you the interview.
Yeah.
How are you recovering on that, by the way?
You know what? Fair to admit, it's been 2 weeks now, but I got to tell you, dental surgery is a lot different than just having a tooth pulled. It's when they got to get down in there and dig that sucker out. And I had 3 that went back to the tooth fairy. So, you know, anyway, I'll be okay. Vicodin's a hell of a drug, by the way.
I've heard.
I want to go ahead and say that.
So, first off, Kino has just released a giant pile of Mae West movies on Blu-ray. This is the mother load. If you were a fan of Mae West, this is it, baby. They're wonderful. I'll name them all. Every Day is a Holiday, Klondike Annie, I'm No Angel, total classic there. Go West, Young Man, She Done Him Wrong with Cary Grant. That's a real early 1933. It's tremendous. Going to Town, Belle of the 90s is another fantastic one that's got Duke Ellington and his orchestra in it. It's just absolutely terrific. And then the W.C. Fields classic, My Little Chickadee, Mae West and W.C. Fields, doesn't get any better than that. Yeah. And lastly, Night After Night with George Raft and Constance Cummings. Mae West, is to varying degrees significant in all these films, but if you're a Mae West fan, you got to get them all. You just got to get them all because she was like the original great comedienne. She owned the 1930s, didn't really quite transition beyond that. 1940 is the latest of all these. That's My Little Chickadee. That's when they put her together with W.C. Fields. Yeah. But I mean, she was it. She was like in the 1930s, there were the Marx Brothers and then Mae West. That was it. And she just owned that period.
Absolutely. She had a little renaissance there in the middle 60s when she would hang around with the Three Stooges and then pop up on television every now and again. When she was well past her prime, but still playing it like she was 22.
And she was so smart and so suggestive at a time when that was not okay. Yeah. She really pushed the envelope of the code. But I mean, there's great stuff here. There are audio commentaries that are just absolutely terrific on all of these. Kat Ellinger does a bunch of them. She Done Him Wrong with Cary Grant. There are actually 2 commentaries, one by David Del Valle and the other one by Kat Ellinger. And they're all great. You get just a wonderful, wonderful sense of her career and lots of great insights. I also really, really like the commentary by Alexandra Heller Nicholas and Josh Nelson on Klondike Annie, which is a film that I had never really seen before. Directed by Raoul Walsh, 1936, good, solid programmer, but awfully, awfully fun and a wonderful, wonderful comedy for this one. So a wonderful commentary for this one. Mm-hmm. So, all these great Mae West movies. Then we've also got, let's see here, a couple of Basil Dearden movies. Basil Dearden, British director of a certain caliber in the 1950s. This is from 1950 and 1956. Is The Blue Lamp from 1950 with Dirk Bogarde, and then, which is fine, it's a crime film and it's kind of a classic Dirk Bogarde crime film. Basil Dearden is sort of he's along for the ride with Dirk Bogarde, but here's the one you got to get. You got to get Basil Dearden's Who Done It from 1956, because this features Benny Hill.
Yes.
Young Benny Hill.
Young Benny Hill.
Young Benny Hill. I am such a Benny Hill fanatic. It's unbelievable. I grew up on Benny Hill. Really, this is just so priceless. An Ealing comedy directed by Basil Dearden with Benny Hill. Rank organization, it's absolutely terrific.
Benny's taken a bit of a hit in the last, over the last decade or so. Benny was a regular fixture on PBS.
Oh yeah,
when I was coming up, but PBS doesn't run that stuff anymore because Well,
look, this is wonderful. This is not a Benny Hill movie per se. It's a Belinda Lee movie.
Yes.
But it's it's a fun kind of a espionage comedy with mistaken identity and all kinds of fun stuff going on. It's really good. Who Done It? Awfully, awfully fun. got a bunch of other classics, assorted classics here that are really, really priceless. Thoroughly Modern Millie caught a lot of flack at the time. That's from 1967. Julie Andrews coming off of Sound of Music.
Yeah.
And kind of got shot down for this. It was a little overpriced, a little bit eccentric, but I still think it's really fun. Carol Channing and Mary Tyler Moore are terrific. I mean, come on, Mary Tyler Moore and Julie Andrews in the same movie. How often does that happen?
Yeah.
Directed by George Roy Hill in his prime. Richard Fleischer directing Crossed Swords, which was a great kind of swashbucklery thing from 1977. Star Wars overshadowed everything at the time, but this was great. It got Oliver Reed. This kind of came on the heels of the Richard Lester's Three Musketeers and Four Musketeer movies. It's got Oliver Reed, Raquel Welch, Rex Harrison, Charlton Heston, Ernest Borgnine shows up for some weird godforsaken reason. George C. Scott is in this thing. I know, Ernest Borgnine, period film? What, are you kidding me? Lilies of the Field.
Oh,
Sydney. With I'm telling you, man, this is like the blackest show we've ever done.
Sydney. I love that. One of my favorite Sidney Poitier movies. That is.
It is. This is really the one. I mean, this won in the Oscar, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Lilies of the Field won in the Oscar, and it's got a whole ton of Academy Award nominations as well. Ralph Nelson, not a particularly big time director, but man, 1963. This is just such a poetic, beautiful movie. Poitier's great. The nuns are great. It's really a sweet film. It's just got his heart in the right place, and it pushes all the right buttons. The producers, the original Oscar-winning Mel Brooks, not the musical version, but the one with Zora Mostel and
Gene Wilder.
And of course, our very, very well. So Kenneth Mars, who plays the Nazi in this, and who was also kind of a Mel Brooks regular, Kenneth Mars also showed up as the inspector with the German accent, kind of the quasi Dr. Strangelove guy in Young Frankenstein. But do you know what else Kenneth Mars most famously did?
Huh.
Kenneth Mars was the voice of the dad in The Little Mermaid.
Oh, get out! Really, fantastic.
King Triton.
That's fantastic. Long career. Long career. Hey, even look, the play, the musical. It's just funny the way things go. It took some punches here in the last 15, 20 years about that whole, funny Nazi thing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, it was only 20 years post the actual war when they actually produced the musical. And nobody had a problem with it. Move forward 60 years, and now we got a problem with the ridiculous Nazi.
I know.
It's really, really funny the way those things sort of frame up.
It's gonna all come back around again.
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Lust Caution, the Ang Lee film that was release rated NC-17. It is still NC-17 on this Blu-ray, and I think undeservedly so. I think that was an unfair rating. But this is just an absolutely beautiful film. This was the first time Ang Lee went back and made a Chinese language film of any variation of Chinese language since The Wedding Banquet.
Yeah.
And it's just pure poetry. This is a gorgeous film. It's a period assassination plot and romance thing. It's kind of noirish and intriguey. But one of the reasons you got to see this is for the Alexandre Desplat score, which is just to die for. It's a wonderful film. I love Lust Caution. I think the rating is unfortunate. Got to see it. The Choir Boys. Based on this is Robert Aldrich directing this, one of the all-time great directors, based on a novel by Joseph Wambaugh. Was this the first Wambaugh novel adapted, or was that the Onion Field?
Choir Boys was in 77. Seems to me like the Onion Field was before that.
Yeah, so it would have been the Onion Field.
Ted Danson and James Woods and all those guys. So yeah, I think this would be the second one. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the second one.
Lou Gossett Jr. Man is just so good and.
Oh, he's phenomenal in this. Lou is phenomenal. Charles Durning's phenomenal. James Woods again is really good. Randy Quaid before he went completely off his rocker.
Yeah.
No, Choir Boys is a terrific film. All those Wambaugh stories are really tough. Harold Becker's got another Wambaugh film here, The Black Marble. This is from 1980. This is not quite as impressive as the others, but it still has it's got a good, real tough, hard-boiled plot. Robert Foxworth, Paula Prentice, Harry Dean Stanton, good solid, cast. Owen Roisman shot the hell out of this thing. Maurice Jarre did the score. The Black Marble, another good Joseph Wambaugh thing.
Yeah.
And then we got some Bob Hope stuff here. I love the Bob Hope stuff because they're all so stupid. and I enjoy them. I enjoy them. Alias Alias Jesse James with Rhonda Fleming, who, of course, I met when she was married to Ted Mann, owner of Mann's Theaters at the time. She left us not too long ago. My Favorite Blonde with Bob Hope and Madeline Carroll. Bob Hope and Dorothy Lamour in Caught in the Draft. And then Bob Hope and Paulette Goddard, one-time wife of Charles Chaplin, in Nothing But the Truth. And you know what? All of these are just silly. Bob Hope's just being a nut, and he's paired with women who are far too beautiful to really share the screen with him, but they're all really, really fun. I would say My Favorite Blonde with Madeline Carroll, who's probably the least known of the actresses, is probably the best. Yeah. It's super, super fun. And, you know, but in any case, you're watching Bob Hope for the freaking nose. That's what you're watching it for.
Yeah.
Got a bunch of Billy Wilder titles here. We've got, well, a couple of Billy Wilder titles, at least. The Emperor Waltz and The Fortune Cookie. Neither of these are considered Billy Wilder's best, or even close to, but they're worth checking out. Yeah. And especially because our friend and colleague Joe McBride did the commentaries for both of them. Joe, of course, wrote the book Billy Wilder Dancing on the Edge. So he is perfectly capable and qualified to do the commentaries on these things. Fortune Cookie is kind of, you know, at the end of his career, Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. It could have been better, but Billy's getting a little long in the tooth. And The Emperor Waltz with Bing Crosby and Joan Fontaine, kind of, you know, going through the motions. This is from 1948. This is Billy before he's really hit it big. 2 years later, he was big, but 2 years later he would get, you know, Sunset Boulevard, and then it was, you know, game on. Yeah. But in any case, no, it's that's fun as well. Joan Fontaine, one of my all-time favorites. Bing Crosby, always a blast. Mm-hmm. And then we've got a bunch of Italian and French stuff, which I'll make quick mention of here as well. Lino Ventura and Jacques Brel, A Pain in the Ass. I love that. No American film would ever name itself that. Edward Molinaro directed this. Edward Molinaro, who, of course, would also do La Cage aux Folles. And this is Francis Weber wrote this. So it's an interesting action comedy. It's you know, Weber is one of the funniest guys who's ever lived. So it's worth checking out. Jean Gabin, older and tough in Rififi in Paris. Do you ever see this?
Oh,
no,
yeah.
It's not like
it's not
this
the
is.
other. Yeah.
It's not the other. It's you know, it's good. It's solid. It's Jean Gabin just kind of owning his age and being real tough and hard boiled from 1966. 7 Days, 7 Nights by Peter Brook with Jean Moreau and Jean-Paul Belmondo. Peter Brook, wonderful British stage and screen director. This is great. He's working with a couple of amazing French actors here. A lot of people might not realize Peter Brook made a French language film. Yes,
Belmondo, didn't we lose Belmondo? What is it, this year?
Just recently.
Just recently, right? Yeah, Belmondo.
Just recently, right?
Yeah. We honored Belmondo at LAFCA. What?
We did.
Yeah.
We gave him the Career Achievement Award, and I think it turned into a little bit of a fiasco because he was not happy with his hotel room when he got here. You know, leave it to the French, right? And do you remember that evening? He was sitting there with like three gorgeous women, like seen from a Bond film. Yeah, it's like, did you bring the Bond girls with you, or did you hire them out? What's the story there?
Yeah, I kept hoping to God they were his daughters, but you know, they weren't.
Oh dear. Yes, indeed.
I'm just jealous. What the hell am I whining about?
I know. Claude Chabrol movies here. So many Claude Chabrol movies. That guy used to be just unbelievably prolific. Blue Panther and Bluebeard. They have nothing to do with each other other than the fact they have blue in the title. And they're both very, very good. Michelle Morgan and Danielle Darrieux are wonderful, along with Hildegard Neff in Bluebeard. But I think my favorite of these two is possibly Blue Panther, which I had not seen before and has a really, really interesting cast, including Stéphane Audran, who was at one point married to Claude Chabrol. And then we have L'amour braque by Andrei Zolavsky, which is, you know, this is from 1985. It's not like super old and classic foreign language film. they're kind of bragging about how much stuff they've got on this thing. There's a couple, two different audio commentaries, one by Kat Ellinger, the other one with Zalowski and his writer. A bunch of behind the scenes things. Look, I love this because it's got Sophie Marceau in it, and I adore Sophie Marceau. But it's it's kind of a weird modern remake of Dostoevsky that doesn't totally work for me. Sophie Marceau's great. The cast is good, but it's not quite entirely successful in that regard. Alain Delon, didn't we just lose him too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even more recently. Yeah.
Just like a week or two ago or something. Alain Delon and Simone Signoret in The Widow Couderc, Couderc. This is by a director named Pierre Granier de Fer, whom I've never heard of. It's a, cop thing. And then we've got Georges Lautner's The Road to Selena, and another Lautner film called Icy Breasts, with Alain Delon. So
he might still be around, Alain.
Lautner, I think, is still with us.
Yeah.
And he made some pretty decent crime films in the 1970s. Both of these are from the 1970s. They have a real 1970s feel to them. They're a little bit the color's a little bit too sticky. The sound is a little bit too tinny, but otherwise it's fine. Some good audio commentaries on here. Only if you like French crime films from the 70s. And
Alain might still, I think, Delon. No, he's still with us.
Alain Delon is?
Yeah.
We lost somebody not too long ago. Maybe it was Belmondo.
They were thinking, but he's still hanging around. 1935.
Oh, man, they're all leaving us.
Well, yeah. What's great about all these French guys, though, Chabrol, you were talking. People forget. I interviewed Claude Chabrol in I think he didn't die until like 2010, 2011, something like that. I interviewed him in 95. I think something like that. Here and down.
No kidding.
So these guys had long careers, not just the stuff that they were doing in the 50s and 60s, that post-New Wave period.
Man, I'll tell you, some of these guys, it's just, they just don't stop making movies. Yeah. It must be nice. Must be nice to have the money and the distribution there.
Well, I'm looking at Inspector Bellamy, 2009. Right? Chabrol I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, and then a bunch of old Hollywood titles, and then we'll move on to 4K or something else here. We got a bunch of fun stuff. Yeah. But Ida Lupino, Gary Cooper, Anne Harding in Henry Hathaway's Peter Ibbotson. This is from 1935, has a David Del Valle audio commentary on it. I got to believe Kat Ellinger and David Del Valle do nothing but record commentaries for Kino. They're just always working.
Yeah.
In any case, this is a Georges du Maurier novel adapted to film with Gary Cooper as Peter Ibbotson, the romantic lead, and Ida Lupino was the notorious Agnes. Solid adaptation of the book, I have heard. I've never read the book, but so I've heard. Mitchell Leeson did No Time for Love with Claudette Colbert and Fred MacMurray. This is when Fred MacMurray was being, they advertised this as with him shirtless. The actual poster art is Fred MacMurray, like bearing his pecs. And I'm like, Fred MacMurray?
Yeah.
I mean, were you really a sex symbol at one point? I guess he was.
He was hard boiled there before it became the father. What is it? My Three Sons? Or
yeah, My Three Sons. Yeah. We got to know them all eventually on television, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like Barbara Stanwyck for me was the mom in the Big Valley.
The mom in the Big Valley.
And then I found out that, she was once young and hot in a femme fatale.
Yeah. Knocked off people, yeah.
And then we also have Claudette Colbert and Fred MacMurray in The Bride Comes Home with Robert Young. This is a little bit more of the Fred MacMurray we're accustomed to and the Robert Young we're accustomed to. This is a great screwball comedy. If you've never seen it, it's really fun. 1935, right in the pocket of the period. Awful lot of fun. It's really, really worth checking out. The Bride Comes Home. Good, solid, classic screwball comedy. Claudette Colbert with Fred MacMurray and Ray Milland in The Gilded Lily. Also very, very fun. This is the very first time that Claudette Colbert and Fred MacMurray actually appeared together in a movie.
Oh yeah, that's like 35 or something like that.
35 as well. Sure is. Yep, absolutely. Directed by Wesley Ruggles again, and it's just it's really quite a lot of fun. So they made 6 films together, Colbert and MacMurray, and That's one of the really, really fun ones. And then another Mitchell Leeson directed film with Claudette, Colbert, and just Ray Milland called Arise, My Love, which is also really sweet and really charming and very clever. This is a little bit later on. This is 1940, so we're starting to turn a little bit during the war. This, by the way, has a screenplay by Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett, and this is one of the movies that helped segue Billy Wilder into that directing career. It's a hell of a screenplay. It's really sharp. Then we have Claudette Colbert and Herbert Marshall in For Frightened People by Cecil B. DeMille, which is just as ridiculous and cheesy and hokey as you would ever have imagined. Honestly, there are times where I wonder why DeMille was the thing that he was. 1934, this whole thing, it's a survival tale, man.
Yeah.
The whole thing, it's like, bubonic plague breaks out on a ship, and these four people get on a lifeboat, and they go off to survive, and they wind up on this island somewhere in the South Pacific. And you know what? Between the boat and the ocean and the South Pacific, it's basically all just one soundstage.
Yeah.
It's like you're watching it and you're like, are you sailing from one side of the soundstage to the other where you put up a bunch of fake palm trees? Because I'm really not buying it.
Oh, boy, oh, boy. Claudette Colbert looks fantastic in that movie. I'm like, really? Stranded on a desert island, are you?
It's so funny.
You look fantastic.
And we just talked about Barbara Stanwyck, another Cecil B. DeMille movie, Union Pacific, with Barbara Stanwyck, who is the standout in this thing. This is basically a Western. That's
late 30s, Joel McCrea, right?
Yeah, 1939. Anchor yourself to Barbara Stanwyck. Don't worry so much about DeMille, who really overplays everything in this. This also has an audio commentary that has a few interesting anecdotes. Gary Cooper and Paulette Goddard in the Cecil B. DeMille film Unconquered, which also has these weird supporting performances by Howard Da Silva and Boris Karloff, of all people. This thing's from 1947. It is better. Well, I'm not even going to say that. It's still a Cecil B. DeMille film. It's still got, people cast against, ethnic type, and it's obvious and embarrassing, and everything that's outside is shot on a soundstage, and it's just absolutely silly. But
Jesse Lasky Jr., I think, screenplay on that.
Yes, he did. Absolutely. Jesse Lasky Jr. co-wrote the screenplay. I mean, this takes place kind of colonial times, American Revolutionary War, and early frontier. I don't know. It's supposed to take place in the frontier, and it all takes place in a soundstage.
A lot of great faces though. Alan Napier, the guy that played Alfred in the original TV Batman series.
Yes, that's right. He's in it.
He's walking around that movie,
and very young in it.
Yeah,
and very young.
Yeah, Ward Bond, a few people. Yeah.
And our last Cecil B. DeMille movie has Gary Cooper and Jean Arthur. It's called The Plainsman. And, it's got most of the same Cecil B. DeMille flaws in it, but it could be worse. It's a Western. It's got Gary Cooper. I don't know. I guess that's enough for most people. Basically, it's the story of Wild Bill Hickok.
Yeah.
Gary Cooper plays Hickok. Not very convincingly. He's still Gary Cooper. Like,
Yeah.
He's
Stiff as a board. Stiff as a board. But ridiculously young in this movie. That's early 30s, mid 30s, something like that.
Yep. And then another one from the mid 30s is this is our very last one here. Marlene Dietrich and Gary Cooper, great pairing in Frank Borzegi's Desire.
Oh yeah.
Which is, it's the code is already effect, so there's not that much desire going on here, but it's still fun because it's an Ernst Lubitsch movie.
Yeah.
Ernst Lubitsch wrote it. Frank Borzage directed it, but it's primarily a Lubitsch story. All the Lubitsch touches are in it, and that makes it fun. So you're watching it for the Lubitsch touch, as it is always called. So let's move on to something else, Tim. Shall we?
I was looking up at the 4K.
Yeah.
The UHD business. I see Space Jam: A New Legacy.
Yeah.
I already spit that thing out. You and I, of course, were here for that original Space Jam.
How did you? We never talked about the. How did you feel about the original Space Jam? I'm curious.
I much prefer it to this. Look, a whole different universe of technology came to us in the.
That's true.
And that original Space Jam was Michael Jordan or whatever. Plays more like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, And the way that they're doing that kind of stuff. This is really more about the technology than it is anything else. And I like LeBron, and he can be fun, when he's acting. But in this, there was just too much acting, going on. And so I, wasn't a big fan of this, of the 2020, but the kids seem to enjoy it.
You see, for me, the problem is the technology. Like, I think the premise of the original Space Jam was ridiculous. I mean, it was absolutely absurd. It was like somebody was dropping acid somewhere on the Warner lot and just said, "Hey, man, why don't we match, like, Looney Tunes are popular and Michael Jordan is, like, really popular. Like, why can't we put Michael Jordan and Looney Tunes together?" And for some godforsaken reason, nobody said, "Dude, go home. Go home. That's never going to work." But they did it. Yeah. And it never made sense. But I will say this. LeBron is a better actor than Jordan.
That's true.
Like, he has legitimately more screen presence. He's much more natural. Like, Jordan just wants to play the game. You point a camera at him, he gets very, very patrician. He kind of turns, he starts doing that's talk, like the Bob Dole thing, talking about himself in the third person.
Yeah.
Which is very strange.
the only body that ever got, a quote unquote performance out of Jordan that was natural was Spike in those Nike commercials. Those commercials from 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
He was very charming in those spots, but then again, so was Spike.
Very true. But LeBron is legitimately very natural on camera. Yeah. He's very funny, isn't he? He can be very funny. He can be, he can act. Straight up.
Trainwreck. Was it Trainwreck? No, Train?
Yeah, it was Trainwreck. Yeah. It was Trainwreck. He was terrific.
He's just absolutely terrific in that movie. Yeah.
He's great in that movie. He's wonderful. But it's all technology here. It's just like splash and sizzle. And I'll tell you, it owns the 4K. It really does. It totally owns the 4K. The TV just pops and everything is just larger than life. But, I don't know, man. It's got some, I got a few extras on it. They're only on Blu-ray, some featurettes and, deleted scenes and, but as far as showing off the 4K, man, it's really gorgeous. The colors explode. The blacks are amazing.
Misery.
The one that,
which Misery?
Misery. This is our Stephen King Misery, man.
Rob Reiner, which was an interesting moment for Rob, because not exactly a Rob Reiner kind of film. He tried,
right.
He didn't want to stick right in, he did that, was it Mississippi Burning or something like that? Was that the one you did?
No, that was he did the other one. What was it?
The one about Medgar Evers, I think it was.
Yes, that is. Yeah.
With Whoopi Goldberg and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, he would venture off into other genres. This was an interesting little walk for him. One of the better adaptations of King, if you ask me. Young Kathy Bates.
Yes, and I credit that to William Goldman, who wrote the script.
Yeah.
That was William Goldman took, when you got a great screenwriter adapting a great novel by a great novelist, classic Hollywood movies are filled with stuff like that. And it works, man. I'll tell you, Kathy Bates is fabulous in this thing. And this was, I realized, 1990.
Yeah.
This is maybe 6 or 7 years after she appeared on The Love Boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, all right. Yeah, all right, right on.
Because they cheated her, because she should have been cast in that Frankie and Johnny movie.
Yeah, that's right.
Because she did the role on Broadway on stage, but they cast Michelle Pfeiffer instead. And frankly, I'm sorry, that had a little bit to do with it. But and while I appreciated that movie, I know it would have been a better movie with Kathy Bates.
Yep.
Because Kathy Bates looked the part. Michelle Pfeiffer was too goddamn beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who the hell? First of all, why are you a waitress?
Yeah. True.
Quit this job. And I'll buy you a condo. Get the hell out of here.
Well, but by the same token, Clint in his new movie Cry Macho, Clint is 90 in that movie, or 91, whatever he is now.
Yeah.
But then again, so is Shatner. Yay, William Shatner for oldest guy in space. Let's applaud the Shat.
What's wonderful about Shat? And I'm gonna let you get your thought back.
Yeah.
His mind is as
so
clear
sharp
as when he was playing Kirk.
It's unreal.
He was sharp. He's sharp. He's quick. He's witty. Look, I'm not dumping on old people. I'm approaching that age far too quickly to do that. But I got to tell you, if in 20 years, when I'm 80, if I'm as sharp as he is now at 90, I will be the happiest human being on earth.
It's unreal. It's so inspiring to see him. It really is. It's just, it's a beautiful, I want him to play Kirk one more time. Just one more time, man. I just want one more Kirk turn.
Yeah.
And I would so go see that in a movie. But yeah, what I was going to say is Clint at 90 in Cry Macho is playing a character which in the book is apparently like 38. It's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Anyway,
I knew that there was
Misery.
something wrong with that damn movie.
See,
I did not know what you just told me, but now that you just told
somebody
me
else told me that, and now I know, right?
Okay.
Now that you know, you know.
Okay.
So, Misery looks very good in 4K. This is a Kino Lorber 4K. I don't know where the mastering of the film has necessarily taken place, but it's not the best 4K, but it looks very good. It's very nice. Better than most of the other Kino Lorber stuff. And it comes with a ton of featurettes, all the stuff, all the EPK stuff. It's all here. It's a load of featurettes and the two original commentaries, one by Rob Reiner and one by William Goldman. So it's a really, really nice set. It's 4K Ultra HD, Dolby Vision for those paying attention. And my television is Dolby Vision enabled, and man, does it look gorgeous. Wow. Speaking of which, my goodness, Inglourious Bastards is one freaking just spectacular looking 4K UHD. It really is. This is another one of those reference standard things. It's got a Movies Anywhere code on it, so you can add it to your Movies Anywhere library. You can watch this thing anywhere, upside down, inside out, on your phone, on your iPad. I was never a huge fan of the movie originally, so I'm reevaluating it, and I have to say it is a better film than I gave it credit for originally. It really is.
Well, I don't know how big of not a fan you were of it originally. I had my criticisms of it originally. It's still one of those Quentin Tarantino screenplays that's too long.
Yep.
And because of that, it runs the gamut from absolutely brilliant to sometimes perfectly inane. So it's one of those, but broadly speaking, it has moments in it that are so powerful and so impactful that you just have to let the rest go.
I agree completely. I mean, it's like he works so hard and he takes so many risks. Some of them don't pan out. He's swinging for the bleachers in every scene, and he's striking out a few times. Yeah. But man, he hits some home runs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
he really
yeah.
does.
But the right editor, and this would be a flawless film. Quentin,
so,
but whatever.
So the DTS HD audio is really an unbelievable mix. It is a tremendous mix. You really got to that's the one you got to work the speakers over with that thing. It's absolutely fantastic. And the HDR, if you're all set up for HDR with your system, it'll blow your mind. This is another one of those reference standard discs. Put it on, it'll show off your system like nothing else out there. 4K of Inglourious Bastards, Quentin Tarantino. And then lastly on the 4K front, we have Volume 2, the much awaited Volume 2 of the Columbia Classics 4K Ultra HD collection. I gotta say, Tim, it's not as impressive as the first one, which of course had, League of Their Own and Dr. Strangelove and Lawrence of Arabia. And
this one bounces around a bit. I mean, not all these movies really go together. Anatomy of Murder and Oliver.
Yeah. It's a little weird, right? Yeah, it's kind of a
yeah. How are we hooking that up there? And Stripes? I mean, really? Stripes? End with Taxi Driver?
Yeah.
Really?
I know.
Okay.
I expected at least several Best Picture winners in here. The previous one had Lawrence of Arabia, which won Best Picture, and had Gandhi, which had won Best Picture. It had real, credibility. I mean, in this one, most of these films were nominated for Best Picture: Taxi Driver, Social Network, Sense and Sensibility, Oliver, but only Oliver won. And, Stripes is a little weird. Anatomy of a Murder is a little bit weird to throw in there. Yeah. They're all fabulous. Yeah, these are all great
movies, but I'm not sure that a single buyer, unless you're you and me, or somebody, I'm not sure that a given sort of ordinary patron would want Taxi Driver and Stripes.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at this. I'm like, okay, I can see someone who loves Oliver loving Sense and Sensibility.
Yes.
Cannot really see the person watching Taxi Driver then wanting to turn around and watch Stripes. That's a little weird.
That's just, I don't know, man. I don't know.
So yeah, I don't really get how they're choosing them, but it's a beautiful set, and the extras are absolutely superb. The book that it comes with, it comes in the same packaging as the previous one, with that really beautiful book that just has all the goodies in it and all the pictures and all that stuff. tons of great extras on here. I mean, Oliver especially. I was elated. I've watched and listened to everything on Oliver, including the commentary with Stephen Smith, which is fantastic. Jack Wilde screen test, absolutely terrific, very impressive. And then a whole bunch of featurettes that are just absolutely wonderful. And Oliver is, one of my all-time favorite films. So I just can't get enough of that. Taxi Driver, I'm going to be diving into tonight as it happens. Mm-hmm. Taxi Driver also has a gigantic pile of extras, which I admit I have not completely delved into yet. It's got a 40-minute Q&A with everybody from the 2016 Tribeca Film Festival, which I'm super looking forward to. Scorsese, De Niro, Jodie Foster, all of them. And then it's got the Scorsese Paul Schrader commentary, which was originally recorded by the Criterion Collection, which I am very, very thrilled with. So that's a first-rate commentary. And then other commentaries by Paul Schrader and Professor Robert Kolker and a whole bunch of other featurettes and thing on locations. I'm really looking forward to it. So a lot of great stuff there. But again, if you want those movies all together, you're one of the very few, I suspect.
We moving on to the new stuff?
Let's do new stuff. Yeah.
Which Blithe spirit are they talking about? Because I know there's that new thing from 2020.
That's the one.
That's the one. Okay, because I was hoping it might be the Rex Harrison.
Yeah, no, it's not the Rex Harrison David Lean film. No. This is the one with Isla Fisher, Judi Dench, Leslie Mann, and Dan Stevens.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a weird movie, man.
Yeah, which is why I was hoping it was the other one.
Yeah, I mean, because I love the Rex Harrison film.
Oh yeah.
By the way, do you know that there's some funny stories from the Rex Harrison film, and this is going to tell you a lot that Tim and I are talking about the other Blithe spirit when we should be talking about this one. But the David Lean was not known for his sense of humor. He was raised a Quaker, and he kind of did that movie as a favor to Noel Coward, who gave him his career. Mm-hmm. And Rex Harrison and Lean did not get along. Now, it's a little bit interesting that overlap, because David Lean had edited Pygmalion, which was then remade with music, obviously as My Fair Lady, in which Rex Harrison won an Academy Award. But those two films, their careers otherwise didn't really overlap except for Blithe Spirit. And there were Noel Coward, one of the great wits of all time. There are scenes where Rex Harrison delivers the line. It's very funny and witty and so forth. And he looks over at camera, and Lean is not laughing or even cracking a smile. He's just kind of rubbing his chin with this pained expression on his face. And then he would turn to the rest of the crew, turn to the cameraman, and he would say, "I didn't think that was very funny, did you?" And it so pissed Rex Harrison off. Rex Harrison was so angry that here's his director who just can't judge the comedy. He's asking the cameraman if he thought it was funny. It's terrible. Like it was, but yet the movie is perfectly delightful.
Lovely. Ronald Neame.
What's wrong with this one, Tim? Why does this just not hum?
There you go. A very, very, very good question. Well, Dan Stevens is lovely. But he's he's very good. But he's no Rex Harrison.
There you go.
There's a certain amount of charm there that just cannot be duplicated. And for that matter, the rest of that wonderful cast from the 1945 film. All these, not just Constant Cummings, but Margaret Rutherford. How do you replace her? So there are all kinds of people there that you just can't. And not to mention, you got Noel himself narrating the film.
Yeah.
And he's hitting all the beats exactly right because he wrote them. So, and so I imagine that this film, the one that we're talking about, the Dan Stevens film, it was kind of done to begin with because you just didn't have all the right elements.
That's a good point. We got a great little movie, a little compilation of movies here. It's called Who Will Start Another Fire? This is from Kino Lorber. It's a collection of 9 short films by emerging filmmakers from quote unquote underrepresented communities around the world. And I would just say focus on the fact that these are just 9 really, really interesting short films from all different backgrounds around the world. Really interesting short films like Flying by Pierre Tracy Shen, Family Tree by Nicole Magabo Kigundu, Troublemaker by Olive Nwosu, Polygraph by Samira Saraya, The Lights Are On, No One's Home by Faye Ruiz, By Way of Canarsie by Leslie Steele and Emily Packer, The Rose of Manila by Alex Westfall, Slip by Nicole Otero, and Not Black Enough by Jermaine Manigault, or Manageau. I don't know really how you pronounce it. But anyway, really terrific. All 9 of these are really, really good and worth watching. Great introduction by Charles Burnett.
Charles Burnett, yes.
And, what I like about this is like your own little short film festival. And as someone who has been involved in an acclaimed short film, I'll tell you, it's not easy to make these things.
No.
Forget about how short they are. And some of them are very short. They're all really hard to make, especially to get the performances that you get. And I applaud all these filmmakers, and I hope to see some really good things from them all.
Yeah, beautiful stuff.
Let's see what else we got here in the new stuff, Tim.
The Misfits.
What do you want to pull out? Oh, the Misfits,
which is fantastic.
Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah,
Pierce Brosnan. Yeah, Pierce is kind of owning his age pretty well, isn't he?
Yeah. So because the other day we were talking about all the Bond stuff. And Pierce is playing sort of like a reverse. He's a suave debonair guy who's a thief and a scoundrel, and he's got this. And he's got this kid. This is a Rennie Harlin film, by the way. And here's the thing. Rennie Harlin has been making the same movie for 30 years. Doesn't make any difference who's in it. Cutthroat Island. Doesn't make any difference what the genre is. Long Kiss Goodnight. It's always the same movie.
Rennie Harlin makes a movie. Rennie Harlin lives in China now. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but now I understand where the money came from to make this big, this big, very, very expensive movie.
He relocated to China, and they give him all the money in the world to make these movies.
Now all those Chinese actors make sense to me too. He gets sent all over the world, all kinds of capers, a daughter and Nick Cannon, this team of people, and they got to steal some money from this guy to cheat this gangster and all this kind of stuff. And Pierce, again, he's just doing this guy, but he's just wearing his age, and it's just great. And, but it's a Rennie Harlin film all over the place. You can almost put in any Rennie Harlin film, and it's like you're watching any other Rennie Harlin film. But what's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with it. Nothing at all. Got a movie here called Beats by Brian Welsh. The Steven Soderbergh executive produced this so that people would actually see it. Otherwise, this thing would have gotten lost. I'm serious. That's what got this movie noticed.
Yeah.
This takes place in Scotland in 1994, and it takes place in the world of electronic dance music, EDM, as the kids call it. And it's one of those good, gritty kind of UK, British, Irish, Scottish. There's a lot of these, right? That are all set in this kids trying to escape their unfortunate home lives and social situations through something like dance music or dancing. They're kind of like UK variations on Saturday Night Fever, if we're going to be honest. Yeah. And this is all set against the backdrop of a notorious order from 1994 called the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, which banned, believe it or not, gatherings that featured music that was too beaty. I mean, that's it's like really and it was it was about raves. It was targeting raves specifically, but like how do you even write that law? Too many beats. Like how many beats?
Yeah.
Like how many beats? I can imagine somebody like Dre saying, "I'm sorry, you gotta be more specific." Like how many beats is too many beats? Because I'll drop one fewer. I'll get right below that threshold if you just give me the number.
It's just nuts.
Tim, did you see Free Guy?
I did see Free Guy. Ryan. What's his name running around there?
Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, look, I'll show you something to show you. I'm not a complete and total asshole, but I bought Mint Mobile because Ryan owns this company now.
Yeah, that's right.
And he does the commercials and everything. Anyway, Free Guy is a perfectly fine movie. It is funny.
I love it.
It is just absolutely hysterically funny. And I wasn't going to do it because, I see Ryan's got the gin, he's got the gin, aviation gin. That's his gin. And then he buys the telecom company. And he's got these movies. He's played, who did he play? Obviously he's Deadpool. I think he played somebody else in one of those, DC films too. I can't, and all this kind of stuff. I'm just thinking to myself, you know what, dude, you got too much. That's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. And it's irritating. Then he makes this freaking movie and it's fucking funny. And I'm like, all right. He's just going to be one of those guys. He's just going to be one of those guys. So
this is out on 4K. Disney did not send us the 4K. We only have the Blu-ray, which is unfortunate because I'd love to see how this thing looks in 4K. But and there's a Movies Anywhere code. But regardless, it's really fun. The whole thing is kind of riffing on I guess we could call it a video game era version of Sherlock Jr. or Purple Rose of Cairo, because there's the world in the game and then there's the world in the real life. And they kind of, people are becoming sentient in the game. It's a little matrixy, but it's funny and it's clever and it's self-referential. And it's just, it's a really, really, Taika Waititi, who is an Oscar winner as a screenwriter and a filmmaker, has done Marvel films too. It shows up as the bad guy in this thing. He's terrific. I mean, everything about this movie just works. And here's what I hate most about it. It's directed by Sean Levy.
Yeah.
This is what my 2021 has been like. This is what has been more painful than the pandemic to me. The two filmmakers that I have spent the better part of the last 20 years denigrating and ridiculing
right there with you, brother,
are Zack Snyder and Sean Levy. I have ripped the two of them to pieces. And literally within 6 months, I have to eat crow on both of them.
I will only say this about both of them, because I've been right there with you. But to my mind, about Sean Levy, I will say this. He finally made a decent movie.
Yeah.
So that's what he gets from me.
And he's been doing good work on Stranger Things. I have to be honest,
really. And which is funny because, that's where he should have always been. He should that medium at that scale really serves Sean Levy movies much better. Sean Levy media much better than feature films. Feature films, the jokes wear thin. Night at the Museum. I don't care how many of them you make. That was funny for the first 15 minutes of the first movie, and then everything after that, there you go. But take all that stuff and stack it up on television in a rip roaring TV show, and it's great. And Free Guy. There you go.
Got a couple here from Lionsgate. Lady of the Manor. I wish I could say something nice about this movie, but I can't stand it. It's not that fun. It's like a supernatural comedy, and I don't think it's that supernatural, and I don't think it's that comedic. So Melanie Linsky, who I really like, going all the way back to Two and a Half Men, is hired for this, they do these tours, right, of these old places in the South, and she's hired to be the woman who died in the post Civil War period, who the owner of the house, the lady of the house, lady of the manor. And then the ghost of the actual lady, Judy Greer, shows up. And so now it winds up being this shtick between the ghost of the actual woman and the one who's hired to play her in the tours of the current manor. I don't understand why anybody thought this was funny. But anyway, Justin Long and his brother wrote and directed this, and I don't want to say anything bad about him because I like Justin Long, but devote your filmmaking skills elsewhere. Please. The other one is Catch the Bullet with Jay Scarrett, Peter Facinelli, Tom Skerritt. Jay Pickett, Peter Facinelli, John Skerritt, Tom Skerritt. Going too fast here. This is basically a straight up Grindstone movie, except it's set in the West. So it's Grindstone doing its Lionsgate action thing, except it's now, a Western, which is a little bit of a turn, but, it's, I don't know. It's a chasing an outlaw thing. They made 1 million of these in the 50s and 60s, and I just don't quite know what this adds to any of that.
Yeah. They don't play as well contemporarily now as they did, when we were kids, or even as late as the ones that Clint made in the late 90s, Unforgiven, High Plains Drifter,
right,
in the 80s and 90s. They still played, and they were still banging them out in the early 90s, Geronimo, and a couple others. But by the time you get to the late 90s, the actual Western set in the Old West becomes something kind of difficult to do. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah.
Let's see. Did you see The Green Knight by chance?
I did not see The Green Knight. What did you think?
So I had not seen it. I'd meant to see it and finally caught up with it. So I love David Lowery. I think you and I both really like David Lowery.
Yeah.
He's been coming on for a while. He's got a touch of Terrence Malick to his whole sensibility. And this is basically telling the story of the Green Knight, which is one of those, the story of King Arthur.
Yeah.
Occupies a number of different literary sources. There's Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory. There's the epic poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. There's a whole bunch of different ones. And this is based primarily on that story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And here Sir Gawain is played by Dev Patel. It's very stylish. It's surprisingly faithful to the source material. But, and I hate saying this, Tim, I'm sorry. I love Dev Patel, but I can't get, it's the same problem that I had with the David Copperfield that he was in.
Yeah.
Dev Patel is South Asian.
Yeah.
And I can't, it's like, it's, unless you're going to rewrite it and reconceptualize it in some way that doesn't draw attention to that fact.
You have to take it instead of in a mystical world.
It's distracting.
I will allow for anything to happen in a sort of mystical, magical world. And I know it's the Green Knight and all this kind of stuff. I'll allow for anything there. But if it's meant to be in the world as it was, relatively speaking, then you have to explain to me why that guy is South Asian. You throw in one, I don't know, whatever. But that's just the way I am. It's just the way I am.
I mean, it takes me out of it.
Yeah.
It's distracting. And I remember you kind of helped crystallize that for me after I saw, the remake of The Magnificent Seven.
Oh yeah.
And I came out and you were asking me, and the first thing you said, and I was like, the problem, I was trying to pinpoint my problem with it. And you said, was it forced diversity?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that's it. It felt like forced diversity.
Yeah. You're going to have to, you got to explain these things, or in some way, you can't, it's as bad as Will Smith. One of the first times I bitched about it, and it was Will Smith playing James West. In the Wild Wild West, set when it was set, and I'm like, what? A secret? The brother's a Secret Service agent in 1895? Really?
Yeah.
Really? So and I appreciated it deeply, but this is not a movie that I can even pay any attention to, because it's just decided that the world isn't the world, and that I can't. No, it's distracting. Can't do it.
Naked Singularity was an interesting little thing from Screen Media. I like how John Boyega's mixing it up. He's not taking just the big paydays and the obvious stuff. He's really mixing it up. He's keeping us all off balance. And in this one, he plays a New York public defender who is kind of not certain that he is where he needs to be, and he winds up, he and Olivia Cooke become part of something that I can't really explain, but it winds up basically taking a left turn into a really, really unusual place. And that's as much as I think I should probably say about the story here. See it for John Boyega, see it for Olivia Cooke. They're both terrific in it. They're both doing the best work of their careers. And this movie is going to be forgotten by almost everybody. But check it out. Yeah. Check it out. John Boyega and Olivia Cooke in Naked Singularity. Really an interesting little indie. Should probably start to wrap it up here and migrate into our interview. But are there any others here that you want to focus on?
In the docs, which projectionist is that? The projectionist.
Oh, let me go over to that. Hang on here. This is the Abel Ferrara projectionist.
Okay, the 2019 film. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, this is a documentary by Abel Ferrara. This is from Kino Lorber on Blu-ray. This was a big deal at Tribeca. It got some great comments out of Tribeca. Did you see this by chance?
Oh, I absolutely did. That's why I was hoping it was that one.
Yeah.
Really appreciated that film. I think, really appreciated that film.
Yeah, this is about Nick Nicolau. Who basically a guy who started, he's kind of a famous theater operator. He started with porn films, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he start with adult movies and all that? And this is,
in Queens in the early 70s. Fantastic. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah, this is his whole basically a story of an independent theater operator over the course of several decades. Quite a story. I know a little bit about the guy, but yeah, Abel Ferrara doing some interesting work at this point in his career for sure.
He was exhibiting films that would have never been exhibited, not just porn, but experimental films and short films and films from students coming out of NYU, the film school over there anyway. And a lot of the movies that he played in the middle of the night, that were, kind of, yeah, I guess you call sleazy. Sleazy is the word that they use, but they weren't sleazy. What they were is reflective of the reality of, particularly the reality of New York City during that period. I mean, this is well before the gentrification of New York, the first gentrification of New York under Giuliani. And David Dinkins and all of that. And when, I used to hang around New York back then. And it was just, that whole vibe. And it was really just kind of an amazing scene. Anyway.
I want to make mention of two really quickly before we segue over to the interview. One is Bruce Willis in Survive the Game, along with Chad Michael Murray on Blu-ray and digital copy set. This is another grindstone movie for Lionsgate. I mean, it's if you've seen one Bruce Willis grindstone movie, you've kind of seen them all. He plays a cop, and there's a drug bust gone wrong, and they gotta make it right, and blah 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 blah. And it's very competently made, and it's nothing new whatsoever. But again, Bruce Willis has a following. Want to make sure that his fans don't miss out. Yes, sir.
I'm hoping Bruce will pull off a Nick Cage. Bruce is actually older than Nick Cage, but I'm hoping he'll pull off a Nick Cage where, he goes into the abyss, but every now and again pulls one out, Willy's Wonderland, that wacky rainbow movie, Kick-Ass or something like that. And there you are, and you're like, okay, that's my guy. Still got my fingers crossed for Bruce.
Well, we also have Angelina Jolie, who acts very infrequently these days, is going to show up in The Immortals, directed by Chloe Zhao very soon. But meanwhile, she made this interesting little movie called Those Who Wish Me Dead. This has the Movies Anywhere code on it. And she plays a firefighter in it, a smoke jumper, someone who's a smoke jumper. You hop out in forest fires, and she's traumatized about, these people she was not able to save, and winds up in kind of a road trip with this 12-year-old boy. And of course, it's a chance to redeem herself. And, there are these lightning storms, and it becomes very much one of those road trips, grown up and a kid and a road trip. And it feels a tiny bit like The Mandalorian, I've got to admit. There's a little bit of that going on here, but
I didn't buy her as fighting.
That's the thing, right?
Second, not 1 fucking second. Taylor Sheridan movie. Just not a second that I buy that, So she's got to be beautiful and all that kind of stuff. But there's beautiful, and Angelina is just beautiful. And no, you're not a smoke jumper. Stop.
Yeah. Well, there it is. In any case, that's it for this week. And we'll be back in about 10, 11 days, something like that, to do our little Halloween coverage. A lot of spooky movies, and we'll share our own picks for scary movies that you could watch on streaming at that time, too. And meanwhile, go to Gods at DigiGods. Email us at gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com, or just go to cinegods.com. The podcast is there as well as at DigiGods.com, and we're getting new stuff up there on an increasingly regular basis.
We are going to try to get in another Godcast. We're going to do with some horror movie producers that we're very good friends with. Stereoscopic Productions, the fellows over there, George Lee and Marcus over there, making horror films now. What George likes to call elevated horror, which I think so. We're gonna do a little sit down with them on the Godcast and talk about a film they just made, which happens to feature our other good friend Sherman Augustus
from our first Godcast.
So they just knocked the movie off in Savannah, wicked little horror movie, and we're gonna just talk about the whole horror movie thing.
Yep.
As it comes back on us. I think I reviewed anyway, the Halloween middle film at the top of this podcast. So there's a horror movie thing going on, and horror has been this genre that just won't go away. It's always
very
there.
profitable.
Romantic comedies come and go, space operas come and go, but horror is always there.
It is. It is indeed. All right. With that, and then without further ado, here is our interview with Grady Hendrix and Chris Poggiali, the authors of These Fists Break Bricks, which is a terrific book, wonderful forward by RZA of Wu-Tang Clan, who of course is one of the all-time great fans and boosters of this genre, and this is an absolutely terrific book. So here, interview with Grady Hendrix and Chris Poggiali, authors of These Fists Break Bricks. And I am thrilled to be interviewing Grady Hendrix and Chris Poggiali, who have written a phenomenal and spectacular new book, These Fists Break Bricks: How Kung Fu Movies Swept America and Changed the World. And this is, of course, as anyone who listens to the podcast knows, is a subject near and dear to my heart. I wrote a Jackie Chan book many years ago, and I have contributed to Stephen Hammond's two excellent books on the history of Hong Kong cinema. So I love this stuff. I live for this stuff. Let me ask you guys first. I mean, what I find fascinating here is that you stop basically at the 80s. You only sort of look at a certain period here, and you're using that as the lens through which to look at the broader society and how the films have impacted the society, which no previous book, including anything that I've ever contributed to, has really done. And it's incredible to me because you went deep. You went back into even the pre-Shaw Brothers period. Could you talk just about where did this idea sort of hatch, and how did you go about your research?
Well, I had done a book called Paperbacks from Hell, which is the history of the paperback horror boom of the 70s and 80s. And Chris had seen that and really liked the approach, the sort of narrative approach. And he has a huge collection of posters and ad materials and all that stuff. And so he talked to me about, would I be interested in working with him on a book that, looked at this sort of kung fu movies coming from America and tried to find this story in there. And that's what we spent the most time sort of talking before we decided to do this. Is there a story here, a beginning, middle, and end? And we found one. But then in terms of the research, I didn't know what we were biting off, because I was like, well, before we start around the early 70s, we got to know what was before that. And we started there, and Chris is a beast in terms of research. And so the stuff he kept coming up with just kept taking us down these rabbit holes that some of them never led to anything, but a lot of them just led us to really wild places. I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk a little about the research.
Well, I had, in addition to the movie posters and the ad sheets and newspaper ads, I had a lot of martial arts magazines, martial arts movie magazines, like a complete run of Fighting Stars, a complete run of martial arts movies, a lot of Black Belt and Inside Karate, in which they interviewed martial artists who made movies, or people like Sterling Siliphant and Robert Klaus, who wrote or directed some of them. So I had a lot of the research already, and I also had gathered a lot of research, like reviews from Box Office and Hollywood Reporter and Variety, and articles about the distribution and the importation and the box office and the grosses and the rentals for these films. And so I had a lot of it already, but we started doing research into martial arts themselves, and when they came to the U.S., how they came to the U.S., who the major players were. And that's how we turned up like Jack Sergel, who, we knew about because of Blood on the Sun, but we didn't know his story. So Grady got in touch with some people who knew Sergel or were, relatives of people who had been to Manzanar. And so, yeah, a lot of that research about the history of the martial arts came during the writing of the book or shortly before. But I brought a lot of the movie research. with me, along with the posters.
Yeah.
Well, it's the posters and the artwork, I think, that just magnetized me. I mean, I was amazed. Some of those ads for, jujitsu instructions and all that stuff. Those are wonderful archival finds, and it just kind of brings everything alive. Was there anything, tell me, what surprised you most in the process? Writing you always find the things that you're looking for, but then you find things that you're not looking for. What were the big surprises for you in this process?
No, Chris, you want to take that one first?
Well, I wanted to talk with some of the writers and editors of the magazines that I just mentioned, like Martial Arts Movies. And so I started looking around for the editor of Martial Arts Movies, who was Sandra Siegel. And I found out that she's now Judge Sandra Ikuda, a 9th District Circuit Judge.
Oh, that's great.
And she was, I interviewed her, and her husband was the top photographer, Ed Ikuda, the top photographer in the 70s and 80s for all of these magazines. He photographed everybody from Bruce Lee to everyone. So the cover of Timac that's in the book is one of Ed's photos. He was at the Bruce Lee auditions when they did the John Peters, Barbara Streisand movie in the late 70s. He was there. He photographed all of that. Just an incredible talent. So I interviewed them both for the book, and so that was a real kick, finding out that she was a judge now.
Yeah,
Grady, how about you? What was a fun surprise?
Well, for me, there was so much stuff in here that was surprising. So many threads we followed back to really wild sources. And one of the things something Chris was just saying, and this blew my mind, is after Bruce Lee died, Barbara Streisand helped put together this giant Bruce Lee biopic project where Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee's brother and Robert Klaus and John Peters, all these people participated, looking for a Bruce Lee lookalike to make in a major studio film. And it's, and so you think of Bruceploitation movies as these cheap knockoffs, not this giant studio production with, people like Chuck Norris and Barbara Streisand lending their name. But there were also some people that we sort of tracked down or learned about that I wish we'd been able to do more with. And, one of them who really sort of captured me is Joan Deanda and Marcia Silen. Chris, is that how she pronounces her name?
Yeah, I think so. Or Marcia Silen.
Yeah. Because they were these two women, and they were a couple, and or we think they were a couple. They seemed to have been a couple, and they ran this company called Cineworld Pictures, and they started out making these 16 millimeter softcore movies, and then sort of got out of that when the FBI started cracking down, because the FBI kept coming in their office wearing wires, trying to get them to make hardcore movies in the early 70s so they could bust them. And they were like, they always recognize them because the agents offered too much money. So then these two women got out of that, took over a porno theater in LA, and started screening all these classic movies with Rosalind Russell and Mae West, made it a showcase for female filmmakers. Then they started a distribution company specializing in movies by and about women. And then they started Cineworld, which was doing they didn't have a lot of money. So they were doing really bottom of the barrel movies like The Dragon Lives Again and The Warrior Within, which was a documentary, and some blaxploitation movies. And then they got into children's films. It's just, and they don't figure in the book a whole lot, but it's just, there's so many people with these wild stories that I wish we'd had more space for.
Well, talking about wild stories, so one of my very, very close friends recently departed was Martin Zweiback, who was one of the head writers on Kung Fu on television. And I used to talk to Martin a lot about that stuff. And one story that never, ever came up is the one that you guys relate in the book, which is that Kung Fu was canceled when David Carradine went on a naked peyote binge around Laurel Canyon. I mean, that I had never heard that. Where did that story come from? That's incredible.
Well, you know, we found the original articles about it, and I think David Carradine talks about it in his memoir, Chris, doesn't he?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I had never heard it. That was new to me. That was amazing.
Well, and you know, one of the things that was interesting doing this book is looking at the time, like they never gave that as the reason they canceled Kung Fu, but you look at the timeline of when these things were happening and when it was canceled and what episodes they had in the can, and you look at the language in the press release about it ending its run, and Carradine saying, you know, this wasn't a good look, and you just put those pieces together and you're like, oh, huh. So that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, and I, you know, that you talk about so many films too that I have never seen, and that was really humbling to me, because I come from that generation, that Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan generation that then turned around and discovered all the Shaw Brothers movies, and we like to think that we sort of have this great encyclopedic knowledge that we've now seen the whole canon all the way from, you know, Shaw Brothers all the way through the Hong Kong New Wave, and you guys pick up. I mean, there's so many really cool obscure movies in here that you talk about. Where do you think the greatest influence on American culture from the martial arts world happened? Where was it? Was it the Hong Kong movies? Was it the homegrown stuff? Was it exploitation films? How do you sort of break that down as to sort of the explosion of popularity for martial arts from martial arts movies in American culture? How does that break down for you guys?
I don't know, Chris. What do you think?
Well, do you mean because, Kung Fu premiered over a year before the big craze happened?
Yeah, because it just, you know, for me, it was Bruce Lee. And then Bruce Lee, I got into Kung Fu on television, and then from there, Jackie Chan. And so that was sort of my trajectory. But in some, you know, for a lot of people, it was Chuck Norris movies.
Right.
I mean,
right.
And other people still, they were already on board with the Shaw Brothers movies. You know, I know older people older than I am who were all, you know, they were the only white guys going to all the Chinatown theaters. So, you know, where does the American fixation with these films, where does that kind of begin? Is it Bruce Lee, or was Bruce Lee just kind of, did he light the fuse that others carried? How do you sort of see the trajectory?
I mean, I'll jump in and just say, I mean, I think it definitely was Bruce Lee. I mean, his movie wasn't the one that broke big, right? In 73, it was Five Fingers of Death that really captured people. And interesting. Bruce Lee sort of came after, and actually Duel of the Iron Fist, and then around the same time the Bruce Lee movies, the dubbed ones, were being released, Angela Mal films like Deep Thrust were big in theaters, and it wasn't really until August of that year, when the Kung Fu sort of wave was almost cresting from these other movies and everyone jumping in the pool, that Enter the Dragon came out. And by then, Bruce Lee had been dead for several weeks, and that really became huge. And that sort of, if these other movies could have been a flash in the pan, that really planted the flag and made it permanent. But, you know, you had a couple of interesting things happen, which was, one thing was that a lot of the movies, I mean, this was the first time non-white actors were really just, you know, taking the world by storm. I mean, blaxploitation movies had done that. And certainly there were people like Sidney Poitier and things like that, and Harry Belafonte. But these seemed to come out of nowhere. They weren't big studio movies. I mean, they were Warner Brothers movies, but they weren't getting the push. They weren't getting the celebrities. And they seemed to sort of come bottom up instead of top down. And so there was a lot of playing catch up with that. But what you look at them doing to American movies is really interesting. I mean, one of the things is Bruce Lee did something that overshadowed what all these other movies did, all the Shaw Brothers movies and everything, which really emphasized skill and two really skilled opponents trading a lot of blows and doing really these really almost ballets. And Bruce Lee was about, I punch you once and you go down. It was about power. And it was about speed. And that you really see in a way, Chuck Norris is the next version of that, which is he hits you once and you go down. You know, Chuck Norris wasn't about long choreographed acrobatic exchanges. He was about hitting people hard and they fell over. And the other thing I think that made its way into American movies, which had already been there, but I think martial arts movies really put it front and center, is this idea of the underdog, that all these people in these movies they're nobodies. They're poor. They're blue collar, and they're fighting against these larger, more corrupt forces. And you see that really, really getting picked up a lot in American action movies. And then the third thing is training. And that's something not so much from the Bruce Lee movies, but more from the Shaw Brothers movies. It would play in the 70s and especially the early 80s in Times Square. These intricate like training sequences. And you see the way the 80s kind of fetishized training sequences. I mean, certainly Rocky has a lot of training sequences in it, but by the time you get to Rocky 4, where like, you know, 2/3 of the movie is the training sequence, you know, you feel like maybe that's coming a little bit from martial arts movies.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, how much of the artwork is from your private collection? I mean, it sounds like you've got a pretty good archive to begin with.
A lot of it. There were some pieces that I knew I didn't have, and so we got them from the distributor, Seraphim Karalexis, who had released the movies. He had, commissioned Neil Adams to do all of his posters, and so he had the copyright on some of them, or on all of them. And so the few that I didn't have that we wanted for the book, we just asked Seraphim and made a deal with him. So he sent us the 2 or 3. I think there were maybe 4 of them. Like Ninja Warriors was one of them, and Death of Bruce Lee was another one. But yeah, most of the others, I had them, and I mean there were a lot that we thought afterwards, wow, we should have had this photographed, because now this would be the perfect place for that poster, and it's too late. We didn't get it photographed, so that happened a few times. So in a couple of cases, we just had to look around for a good quality scan, but yeah, I mean in some cases we just took scans from the internet of posters that I had. We just didn't get them photographed.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And can I just jump in for a second? Chris just mentioned Seraphim Karalexis, and that was one of the really fun things about doing this book is it opens up into this whole world of these independent distributors like Seraphim Karalexis, Larry Joachim, Terry Levine. And these folks were really they were scrappy and down and dirty in a way that's been lost these days. The way they would sell movies, the way they would go on gut instinct. After he saw 5 Fingers of Death, Seraphim just looked at the credits, saw it came from Hong Kong, and said, I want one of these movies. Flew to Hong Kong, opened up the phone book and looked for a movie studio, said, I want to buy your movie, and then went and watched trailers in their screening room for hours until he saw this movie, The Duel, that he then brought back in his suitcase as Duel of the Iron Fist to have the second martial arts movie in America on the big screen. I mean, just the way these guys really they come from a world that's lost, where they all had offices within a few blocks of each other, where they're all looking at each other's grosses, where they're all hustling. And they are some of the most amazing characters in motion picture history. The fact that, Larry let his son Marco, who was 11 years old at the time, basically give him the idea to do the Green Hornet movie made out of old Bruce Lee footage from the Green Hornet TV show, and then basically let Marco edit this movie together. An 11-year-old boy that went on to become this huge international hit. And the fact that when Larry was like shooting a movie like The Black Samurai with Jim Kelly and would run out of ideas and script pages, he'd call his like adolescent son on the phone and say, what should happen next? And Marco would be like, a jetpack. And Larry would be like, okay, everyone, we got to do a jetpack. I mean, this is not the kind of filmmaking that happens anymore, but it's so great. It's so energizing. This spirit of like, all right, can we make that happen? Can we make it happen by 5 o'clock today? Can we make it happen for $32? We can. Let's do it.
Grady, I'm so glad you went there, because that was actually where I was going to go next, was the distributors, because this brought back a lot of, and everything you're just saying there too, brought back a lot of when, about 20 years ago, my DigiGods colleague Ray Green and I made a documentary, which Ray wrote and directed, called Schlock, The Secret History of American Movies. And we interviewed all of these great exploiters who were still with us then and are no longer. Sam Arkoff and, Corman, obviously, and Doris Wishman. And the one thing that came out of that was a similar kind of a sensibility. Arkoff said to us, he said, we had titles and we had posters, and that's what we sold the movies on. And then we wrote the scripts. And it seems to me that a lot of these guys, I mean, you have a distributor directory in here that has companies in it I've never heard of, like, Cinema Shares and World Northall and, let's another one up here that I had absolutely Ivory League Pictures. Never heard of Ivory League Pictures. I mean, what kind of crazy research did you have to do to figure out who all these companies were? Do any of them still exist?
No. Well, World Northall still exists. It's just that was a family-run business, and they just shut it down. I think they're in real estate now. I think it was the Stanton family ran World Northall. But a lot of the people from World Northall came from Cinema Shares. A key player was Mel Marin, who was the first person who he was involved with the Godzilla movies in the 60s and 70s. He had a deal to distribute a lot of the Godzilla movies. And then he got involved with martial arts movies, first with Cinema Shares. And then he went to World Northall and made the big sale for the television syndication with the Shaw Brothers movies. So he was involved with a lot of different companies over the years. And so I talked to him a few times for the book and for other projects that I'd worked on. But Ivory League was a short-lived company, which I think Mel was involved with anyway. But his assistant was a guy named Ivory Harris, who ran that company. And I think they only released a couple of movies. And it was Ivory. He was the print coordinator for Mel's different companies. He ended up when he passed away, he was working for Castle Hill with Mel.
Interesting.
But he was the guy who shipped out the prints, and he did that job for a number of different companies. Jerry Gross's first company, Cinemation, and so he knew a lot of the exhibitors and the sub-distributors around the country. So he just ran this company on the side while he was working with Mel at I think at that point they were at Castle Hill or Almy Pictures. I'm not sure. They jumped around.
And it's interesting. People tend to think of this as a very male field, but then I was reading in your book under Unifilm the story of Neva Frieden, who was this amazing. I mean, this is a woman working in this field, and you say here that Unifilm released 200 movies theatrically in 9 years. Yeah. That's amazing for an indie. I mean, that's an amazing clip. Talk about Neva Frieden for a second, if you could.
And Neva's great. She was a writer for Playboy magazine. She's very knowledgeable in jazz. So she was their jazz critic and expert for a while in the 70s. She worked for Bryanston releasing in the mid 70s, and then wrote some screenplays. Like she wrote The Toolbox Murders and a couple of Sweater Girls. So she wrote some exploitation movies, and she started working for a company called Condor Films, and they were a sub-distributor on the West Coast, and she was booking their martial arts movies, and she got into a disagreement with a new booker that they had hired, who said, the theaters are asking for more Bruce Lee movies. They want, and she said, well, Bruce Lee only made 4 or 5 movies. That's it. I mean, and he said, well, no, they want movies with the real Bruce Lee. She's like, but we don't have them. If Columbia, at that point, I think Columbia Pictures had most of them that weren't the other 4 that weren't Enter the Dragon. So she said, well, it's, there are only so many Bruce Lee movies around. You have to go with one of the imitations. So they got into an argument about that, and she was let go. And a couple nights later, she got a phone call from these Hong Kong distributors who were upset that she had been fired, and they sent her $5,000 and told her to set up a company to distribute their movies. They had an office in Guam, so they could ship the movies out from there using the U.S. Postal Service. And she said, well, you already have a company in Jacksonville to distribute your movies. We were the sub-distributors for them on the West Coast. And they said, yeah, but we have so many movies, we could use a second company. So they had her set up this company. And yeah, for the next 9 years, she ran it and distributed their films, and also not only in theaters, but on television and home video. Like there was a television division for Unifilm.
Amazing. Amazing. And, one of my other favorite things in the book is how you resurrect a lot of these figures that I had even forgotten about, like Ron Van Cleef and Charles Bonnet, these sort of, these homegrown martial artists who came out of karate and full contact, or, maybe were covered in some other way and had students and were sort of, for a moment, they had a moment in the sun, didn't they?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you look at these guys like, it's funny. Ron was really important in the 70s, not later, but there was a moment when Ron Van Cleef was a really, really big deal. And one of the most famous black martial artists in movies. Charles Bonnet really looked like he was gonna go places. And it's funny, you even look at Jim Kelly towards the end of the 70s, where everyone thought Jim Kelly was gonna be the next Bruce Lee, and it didn't happen. And one of my favorites, who you didn't mention, but Carl Scott, who was a young African-American kid who I think, a lot of these other guys did karate, which is great. Nothing against karate, but Carl Scott did Kung Fu. And so on screen, it's a much more supple martial art. It's much more about forms and stances, and it's much more about flowing rather than power. And he's amazing on screen when you see him in something like Soul Brothers of Kung Fu. And, he was just a kid. I think he was, Chris, in 10th grade when he made Soul Brothers of Kung Fu? Yeah, and his mom let him go to Hong Kong and make it as long as he was back in time to start the school year. And he went on to make a few more movies, and I think just kind of got into other things and moved on. But, Carl Scott's amazing. He's got a lot of charisma. He's got great action chops. And a lot of these guys, they have been forgotten. And so that was a real privilege for us, is to sort of be able to shine a light on their name again. And one other thing that was kind of nice to do is there are a lot of people in the martial arts community, especially the black martial arts community, like Steve Muhammad or Victor Moore, who... Their stories are known in the martial arts community, but they're not really known in the film community. And these are some of the guys who really made martial arts big in America. And so it was really nice to be able to incorporate their stories, even though they're only tangentially related to film, into this bigger picture.
So let's start to wrap up with this question, which is especially relevant for our audience. A lot of these movies, most of these movies, do not live on DVD or on Blu-ray right now. They're not on streaming. They're hard to find. And a lot of this stuff is starting to kind of break. We're getting Jackie Chan movies and blaxploitation movies showing up on the Criterion channel, and companies like Arrow and Kino are starting to include some of them in their Blu-ray releases. What are the do you know anything about whether these movies are going to finally see the light of day and people might have access to them?
Some of them are coming out, like the Shaw Brothers ones, Arrow and 88 Films are doing box sets in the next 6 months or so, next year, of those. Also, there's a box set of Joseph Kuo films that are coming out, and a guy by the name of Michael Worth has been restoring some of the movies. Like he did Dynamo and Leg Fighters, and there were some other ones. I'm blanking out on the name of his company, but if you Google Michael Worth and Blu-ray, you'll come up with some of the films that he's been restoring, and he's also been working on a Bruceploitation documentary for a while. So I think he has a couple of major projects that'll be seeing the light of day in the next year.
And also,
so we're going to start to get them good.
I was also going to say, and do not sleep on New York Ninja. John Liu, who was the super kicker, he never finished this movie for reasons that are unclear. And who is it? Is it Vinegar Syndrome or Severin?
Vinegar Syndrome.
Vinegar Syndrome. Yep. Just found it, completed it, put it all together, and it looks fabulous. And if you want a slice of 80s New York with martial arts in it, New York Ninja is where you want to go.
Oh, that's great. Well, we love Vinegar Syndrome. They do great work as well. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. We have been talking to Grady Hendrix and Chris Poggiali, who are the incredible authors of These Fists Break Bricks, How Kung Fu Movies Swept America and Changed the World, which has a terrific foreword by the RZA as well from Wu-Tang Clan, who, of course, is one of the champions of this genre and these movies. And I'm so thrilled that you got him involved as well. Guys, thank you so much, and all the best going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Take care.